My wife threw a pot of boiling coffee at my face because I refused to fund her son's latest scam. She pointed at the door and screamed, "Give me the money or get out," so I walked away without a word, leaving behind my home, my car, and my life. 3 days later, she came home to an empty house and a stranger in a suit sitting in my favorite chair waiting to tell her that she had made the biggest mistake of her life. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to walk away from people who only loved you for what you could provide. My name is Isaiah Freeman. People on the south side of Chicago used to call me Ike the Iron because I spent 40 years building a logistics empire from a single rusted delivery truck. I dealt with union strikes, mob shakedowns, and recessions without blinking. But nothing prepared me for the enemy sleeping in my own bed. I am 72 years old and I thought I had earned a peaceful retirement. I was wrong. The morning it happened started like any other Tuesday. I was sitting at the head of my mahogany dining table trying to enjoy my grits and eggs. The house was quiet for a moment and I allowed myself to relax. Then the storm doors burst open. It was Kyle, my stepson, and his wife Tiffany. They didn't knock. They never knock. They walked in with that hungry look I had seen 1,000 times before. Kyle is 35 years old, but he still dresses like a teenager who just discovered credit cards. Tiffany trailed behind him, holding a tablet like it was a weapon. "Good morning, Ike," Kyle said, pulling out a chair and sitting down without being invited. He reached across the table and grabbed a piece of my toast. "We have big news. Huge news. Tiffany and I are finally going to make it." I put my fork down. I knew this script. I had heard it when he wanted to open a vape shop that never opened. I heard it when he needed bail money for a DUI. I sighed and looked at him. "What is it this time, Kyle?" Tiffany slammed the tablet down in front of me. It showed a graph with a line going straight up. "It is called Crypto Harvest Ike," she said, her voice high and demanding. "It is a revolutionary blockchain startup. We are getting in on the ground floor. We just need a seed investment." I looked at the number at the bottom of the screen. $200,000. I almost laughed, but I was too tired. I looked at Tiffany. She was a pretty girl once, but greed has a way of making people look sharp and jagged. She looked at me with those blue eyes that used to feign respect but now only held impatience. I pushed the tablet back toward them. "No." Kyle stopped chewing my toast. "What do you mean no? You haven't even listened to the pitch. This is guaranteed returns, Ike. We can double your money in 3 months. I wiped my mouth with a napkin and looked him dead in the eye. "Kyle," I said, my voice low and steady, "we are still waiting on the return from that logistics app you pitched last year, the one that vanished into a sports betting site in Vegas." The room went silent. Kyle turned red. "That was a misunderstanding," he stammered. "I was researching the market. You lost $50,000 on parlays, Kyle," I said. "I saw the bank statements. I saw the withdrawals at the casino ATMs. I cleaned up your mess because your mother cried for 3 days straight. But the Bank of Isaiah is closed." That is when Beatrice walked in from the kitchen. My wife. The woman I had married 5 years ago, thinking I had found a companion for my twilight years. She was wearing a silk robe that I paid for, holding a fresh pot of coffee. She looked at Kyle's red face, and then she turned her glare on me. "Why are you upsetting him, Isaiah?" she snapped. She slammed the coffee pot down on the trivet. "He is trying to build a future. Why do you always have to be so critical? He is not your employee. He is your son." "He is not my son." "Beatrice," I said calmly, "my sons run my company. My sons know the value of a dollar because I made them sweep warehouse floors when they were 12. Kyle is 35 and he is asking for $250,000 to gamble on internet magic coins." Beatrice walked around the table and stood behind Kyle, putting her hands on his shoulders. She looked at me with a mixture of disgust and entitlement that made my stomach turn. "You are a selfish old man," she hissed. "You have millions sitting in accounts doing nothing. We are your family. Your money is our money." "No, Beatrice," I said. "My money is the result of 40 years of sweating in trucks with no air conditioning." "It is not for funding fantasies," Tiffany chimed in, her voice dripping with venom. "See, Kyle, I told you he doesn't care about us. He just wants to control us. He likes watching us beg." That triggered something in Beatrice. She stepped away from Kyle and marched toward me. Her hand was shaking. "Give him the black card, Isaiah, the business limit card. We will use that for the investment." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had sworn to love and cherish me. I saw no love. I saw a parasite angry that the host was fighting back. "No," I said. Beatrice's face twisted. It was ugly. It was the face of a stranger. "Give me the card," she screamed. "You owe me this. I take care of you. I tolerate your boring stories and your old man smells. Give me the card." I stood up. I am 6'2". I cast a shadow over her. But she wasn't afraid. She was frantic. I said, "No, Beatrice. And tell your son and his wife to get a job." She didn't think. She just reacted. She grabbed the handle of the ceramic coffee pot. I saw the motion. I saw the brown liquid arc through the air, but I was too shocked to move. The coffee hit the left side of my face. It was boiling hot. The pain was immediate and blinding. It felt like someone had pressed a hot iron against my cheek and neck. I gasped and stumbled back, knocking my chair over. The coffee dripped down my chin, soaking into my white collar shirt, burning my chest. I didn't scream. I refused to give them that satisfaction. I just stood there, eyes squeezed shut, fighting the urge to fall to my knees. The room was dead silent for a second. Then I heard a sound that chilled me more than the burn. Tiffany laughed. It was a short, cruel chuckle. "Look at him," she said. "A clumsy old fool. That is what you get." I opened my eyes. My vision was blurry on the left side. My skin felt like it was melting. I looked at Beatrice. She wasn't rushing to get ice. She wasn't apologizing. She was standing there panting, holding the empty pot, looking at me with pure hatred. "You deserve that," she spat. "You treat us like beggars in our own home." I reached for a napkin and pressed it against my burning cheek. I looked at Kyle. He was looking at his shoes, pretending not to see. A coward. A 35-year-old coward hiding behind his mother's skirt. I looked at Beatrice. "Is that how it is?" I asked. My voice was raspy. "Yes, that is how it is," she screamed. She pointed a manicured finger at the front door. "Give us the money or get out. I am sick of you hoarding everything. This is my house too, Isaiah. You put my name on the deed when we got married, remember? I own half of everything. If you are not going to provide, then you can leave." She was right about one thing. I had put her name on the deed. It was a romantic gesture 5 years ago, a mistake, an error in judgment that I had ignored because I didn't want to admit I had been played. I looked around the room. I looked at the crystal chandelier I bought, the imported rugs, the art on the walls. I looked at these 3 people standing there waiting for me to break, waiting for me to pull out my wallet and buy their forgiveness just to keep the peace. They thought I was trapped. They thought I was just a lonely old man terrified of dying alone. They forgot who I was. They forgot that you don't survive Chicago in the 70s by being soft. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of burnt coffee and betrayal. I didn't say a word. I didn't argue about the deed. I didn't threaten to call the police. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my car keys. I pulled out my wallet. Beatrice's eyes lit up. She thought I was surrendering. She thought I was getting the credit card. But I didn't open the wallet. I simply put it back in my pocket to ensure they couldn't steal it once I turned my back. I walked past Beatrice. She flinched, expecting me to hit her. I didn't even look at her. I walked past Tiffany, who was smirking. I walked past Kyle, who was already reaching for the last piece of toast. "Where are you going?" Beatrice shouted, her voice rising in panic as I reached the foyer. "Isaiah, I am talking to you. You walk out that door, and you don't come back until you are ready to apologize to my son." I opened the heavy oak front door. The morning air hit my burned skin, and it stung, but it felt clean. It felt like freedom. Isaiah Beatrice screamed from the hallway. "Do you hear me? This is my house." I stepped out onto the porch and closed the door gently behind me. I heard the lock click. I walked down the driveway to my sedan. My face was throbbing. My shirt was ruined. My heart was broken. But my mind was clear. She said it was her house. She said she owned half of everything. She thought the war was over because she had fired the first shot. She didn't know that I had just radioed for an airstrike. I got into my car and looked at the house one last time in the rearview mirror. I saw the curtain twitch. They were watching. They were probably laughing, popping champagne, thinking they had won, thinking the old man would be back in an hour, begging to be let in. I put the car in gear and drove away. I didn't go to a hotel. I didn't go to a friend's house. I drove straight to the one place where I still held all the power. The one place Beatrice didn't know existed. The war had just begun. The leather of the steering wheel creaked under my grip as I drove. My knuckles were white, contrasting sharply with the dark interior of the sedan. The left side of my face was screaming. It wasn't just a burn. It felt like someone had taken a blowtorch to my skin and held it there, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the cold knot of humiliation tightening in my gut. I am Isaiah Freeman. I have stared down union bosses and negotiated with sharks, yet I let a woman and her leech of a son reduce me to a fleeing victim in my own home. I didn't drive to the hospital. Hospitals ask questions. Hospitals call the police before you are ready. Hospitals make you a statistic. I drove to the south side to a brick building with barred windows that hasn't changed since the 80s. Dr. Sam was waiting. We served in Vietnam together. He patched me up when a piece of shrapnel took a chunk out of my thigh in the jungle, and he patched me up when a forklift accident nearly took my arm in '92. He is the only man alive who knows where all my scars are. Sam didn't gasp when he saw me. He didn't ask stupid questions. He just led me to the back room, the one that smells of rubbing alcohol and old paper. He put on his gloves and tilted my chin up to the light. The silence in the room was heavy. Second degree. Sam grunted, peeling away the dead skin with a precision that made my eyes water. The coffee was boiling, Ike. Another inch to the left and you would have lost vision in that eye. You are lucky. Lucky. That was a funny word. I sat there on the cold examination table listening to the hum of the old refrigerator in the corner. I felt shame. It is a specific kind of shame that hits a man of my age when he realizes he has been abused. We are raised to be protectors. We are raised to be the rock. Admitting that the woman you sleep next to is capable of hurting you feels like admitting you are weak. Sam applied a cooling gel that stung at first but then numbed the fire on my cheek. He bandaged me up, wrapping the white gauze around my head. When he was done, he didn't hand me a mirror. He handed me a camera. "We need photos," Ike Sam said, his voice low and gravelly. "If you are going where I think you are going with this, you need proof." I hesitated. Taking a picture made it real. It made it a crime scene, not just a domestic dispute. I looked at the lens. I thought about Beatrice. 5 years ago, she was a different woman, or at least she pretended to be. I met her at a charity gala. She was crying in the garden. She told me about her debts, about how her late husband left her with nothing but bills. I stepped in. I was the knight in shining armor. I paid off the house she was losing. I paid for Kyle's college tuition. I thought I was buying peace. I thought I was buying a family. I didn't realize I was just paying the entrance fee to a carnival of vampires. I nodded to Sam. "Do it." The flash of the camera blinded me for a second. Click. Front view. Click. Side view showing the blistering skin. Click. The ruined shirt stained with coffee. Every flash was a nail in the coffin of my marriage. I left Sam's clinic with a bottle of painkillers and a folder of evidence. He didn't ask for payment. He just squeezed my shoulder and said, "Watch your sick psych." I got back in the car. My phone was buzzing in my pocket. I knew who it was. Beatrice. Or maybe Kyle. Probably calling to see if I had died yet or if I had gone to the bank to get their money. I turned the phone off and threw it onto the passenger seat. I didn't go to the Ritz. I didn't go to the Four Seasons. I drove to the industrial district past the rusted skeletons of factories that died when the steel industry left Chicago. I pulled up to a gated lot surrounded by barbed wire. The sign above the gate was faded peeling paint reading Freeman Logistics. This was where it all started. Before the skyscrapers, before the boardrooms, there was this yard and 2 trucks. I unlocked the heavy padlock and rolled the gate back. The tires crunched on gravel as I drove inside. In the back of the main warehouse, up a flight of metal stairs, was my office. The bunker. That is what we used to call it. It was windowless, soundproof, and secure. I had converted it into a small apartment years ago for nights when we had to work around the clock during the blizzard of '99. I never told Beatrice about it. To her, this place was just a dirty old building I refused to sell. To me, it was the only place left on earth that was truly mine. I walked inside. The air was stale, smelling of dust and diesel fuel. I flipped the switch, and the fluorescent lights flickered to life, casting harsh shadows on the concrete floor. There was a leather couch, a small kitchenette, and a gun safe in the corner. I walked over to the safe. My hands were steady now. I stripped off my coffee-stained shirt and threw it in the trash. I put on a gray t-shirt and a pair of work pants I kept in the closet. I looked at myself in the small bathroom mirror. The bandage covered half my face. I looked like a wounded animal. "No," I whispered to the empty room. "I look like a soldier." I sat down at the metal desk and opened the bottom drawer. I pulled out a burner phone. I keep it for emergencies. This was an emergency. I dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang twice. "This is Marcus," a voice answered. Sharp, alert, even though it was late. Marcus is the best lawyer in Chicago. He is 40 years old, hungry and vicious. I paid for his law school because his father was my best driver for 20 years. Marcus doesn't play golf with judges. Marcus finds the skeletons in their closets. "It is Ike," I said. There was a pause. The tone on the other end shifted instantly from professional to personal. "Mr. Freeman, you are calling on the secure line. Is everything all right? I thought you were in the Hamptons with the wife." "I am not in the Hamptons, Marcus. I am at the bunker." "The bunker. You haven't been there in 5 years." I leaned back in the creaking chair, the pain in my face throbbing in time with my heartbeat. "Listen to me carefully, Marcus. I need you to open the file. The Protocol 19 file." I could hear Marcus stop breathing for a second. Protocol 19 was the nuclear option. We drafted it years ago when I first married Beatrice as a fail-safe. It was designed to strip everything away if I was ever incapacitated or betrayed. "Mr. Freeman," Marcus said slowly, his voice dropping an octave. "Protocol 19 is aggressive. It freezes assets. It initiates forensic audits. It alerts the fraud division. If we trigger this, there is no going back. Are you sure?" "What happened?" I touched the bandage on my face. She threw boiling coffee at me, Marcus. "Over money. Over her son's gambling debts." There was silence on the line. Then I heard the sound of a chair being pushed back and keys being grabbed. I could hear the shift in Marcus. The lawyer was gone. The predator was awake. "I am on my way," Marcus said. "I will have the papers ready in an hour. But I need to know one thing, Ike. And I need you to be clear because once I push this button, I cannot unpush it." "Ask," I said. Marcus's voice was cold, deadly serious. "Do you want a divorce, Ike? Do you want to just cut her loose, give her a settlement and live your life in peace? Is that what we are doing?" I looked around the dusty office. I looked at the photos on the wall of my first truck, of the men I worked with, of the empire I built brick by brick. Beatrice and her son wanted to take that from me. They didn't just want my money, they wanted my dignity. They wanted to turn me into a senile old checkbook. They thought they could burn me and I would thank them for the warmth. I closed my eyes. I saw Beatrice's face as she threw the pot. I saw the greed. I saw the hate. Peace was not an option. Peace is for people who have a conscience. Beatrice had none. "No, Marcus," I said, and my voice didn't shake. "I don't want a divorce. A divorce is a legal procedure. This is not legal. This is personal." "Then what do you want?" Marcus asked. I opened my eyes and looked at the gun safe. "I want to burn it all down," I said. "I want them to wake up tomorrow and realize they don't even own the air they breathe. I want to take the house, the cars, the clothes on their backs. I want scorched earth, Marcus." I could hear the smile in Marcus's voice. It was a terrifying sound. "I will see you in 20 minutes, Mr. Freeman. Put the coffee on." I hung up the phone. I sat there in the silence of the bunker. My face hurt, my heart hurt. But for the first time all day, my hands weren't empty. I had a weapon, and I was about to pull the trigger. While I was sitting in the cold silence of the bunker, plotting the end of their world back at the house on Lakeshore Drive, they were throwing a victory parade. I can see it as clearly as if I were standing in the corner of the room. They didn't wait for my engine to get cold before they started carving up the carcass. Beatrice probably went straight for the liquor cabinet. She bypassed the wine she usually drinks and reached for the top shelf, my shelf. She grabbed the bottle of vintage Dom Perignon I had been saving for our 10th anniversary. I bought that bottle in Paris with money I made from the biggest contract of my life. I was saving it for a celebration of love. She popped the cork to celebrate kicking me out onto the street. The house must have felt huge to them. Without my heavy steps in the hallway, without my voice checking on the security system, without my presence reminding them that everything they touched was paid for by my sweat, they felt like kings. Kyle likely wasted no time taking over my spot at the head of the table. He sat in my leather chair, the one that is molded to the shape of my back after years of late nights reviewing manifests. He put his dirty sneakers up on the mahogany surface. He leaned back with a glass of my champagne in his hand and looked at the two women who enabled his mediocrity. I can hear Tiffany's voice. She is the dangerous one. Kyle is a hammer, blunt and heavy, but Tiffany is a scalpel. She knows exactly where to cut. She walked around the living room, running her fingers over the silk drapes and the imported sculptures. She wasn't admiring the art. She was calculating its liquidation value. She looked at Beatrice, who was flushed with adrenaline and alcohol, and she smiled that smile that never reaches her eyes. "You did the right thing, Mom," Tiffany said. Her voice was dripping with fake sweetness. I always hated how she called Beatrice Mom. It wasn't out of affection. It was a strategy. She knew Beatrice was desperate to be needed, desperate to be the matriarch. He was holding you back, Beatrice. He was suffocating you with his rules and his stinginess. You are the queen of this castle now. You deserve to breathe. Beatrice drank it in. She swirled the champagne in her glass and nodded. Her eyes were bright with a manic energy. "I felt bad doing it," she lied. I heard her say it in my mind. I felt bad, but he left me no choice. Who tells a mother to choose between her husband and her son? He brought this on himself. That is the lie she told herself to stop her hands from shaking. She needed to believe she was the victim so she could enjoy the spoils of the war she started. Then came the suggestion. It was inevitable. Tiffany sat down next to Beatrice and pulled out her phone. The screen glowed in the dim light of the dining room. "You know what would make you feel better," Tiffany said. "Retail therapy. You have been so stressed taking care of that ungrateful old man. You need to treat yourself. Remember that Hermes bag we saw last week? The Birkin, the black one with gold hardware?" Beatrice hesitated. Even in her delusion, she knew the cost. That bag was $30,000. It was more than my father made in 3 years of working at the steel mill. "It is a lot of money, Tiffany," she whispered. "But it is your money now," Tiffany insisted. She put a hand on Beatrice's knee. "He put your name on the accounts right. You are authorized. Consider it severance pay for putting up with his temper. Just buy it, Beatrice. Show him that you are not afraid to live." Beatrice looked at Kyle. My stepson grinned, his teeth yellow from nicotine. "Do it, Ma. You are rich now. Act like it." That was all she needed. The permission of the parasites. Beatrice pulled out her wallet. Her fingers fumbled a bit as she pulled out the black card, the Centurion card, the heavy anodized titanium card that opens doors all over the world. It was the symbol of everything I had built. She held it like it was a magic wand. She typed the numbers into the website on Tiffany's tablet. She entered the expiration date. She entered the security code. She pressed the button that said place order. They waited. The little wheel on the screen spun. They were probably already imagining how the leather would smell. Tiffany was probably already calculating how often she would borrow it. Then the screen stopped spinning. A red box appeared. "Transaction declined. Please contact your financial institution." Beatrice frowned. She squinted at the screen. "That is weird," she muttered. "Maybe I typed it wrong." "Try again," Tiffany said, her voice tight. "Just type it carefully." Beatrice re-entered the numbers. She read them out loud one by one. She pressed the button again. She leaned forward, holding her breath. Transaction declined. The air in the room changed. The celebration evaporated. The champagne suddenly tasted flat. Beatrice stared at the tablet as if it had slapped her. "This doesn't make sense," she said, her voice rising an octave. "The limit on this card is practically infinite. Isaiah never checks the daily spending." "Maybe he locked it," Kyle said. He sat up straight, his feet dropping from the table. The arrogance was replaced by a sudden sharp fear. He couldn't have Beatrice snapped. She was trying to convince herself. "He just left an hour ago. He doesn't know how to use the banking app. He is old school. He calls the banker on the phone. He hasn't had time." She picked up her phone. Her hands were trembling now. "I will call the bank. No, I will call him. He is playing games. He is trying to scare me." She dialed my number. I was sitting in the bunker watching my burner phone light up. I saw her face on the screen. The photo I had taken of her on our honeymoon in Italy. She looked so innocent then. I let it ring. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. "Pick up," Isaiah Beatrice hissed at the empty room. "Pick up, you coward." 4 rings. 5 rings. Voicemail. "This is Isaiah Freeman. I am not available. Leave a message." Beatrice slammed the phone down on the table hard enough to crack the screen. "He is not picking up. He is ignoring me." Kyle stood up. The fear in his eyes was turning into rage. Rage is the only emotion Kyle knows how to process. When he is scared, he breaks things. He walked over to the side table where I kept my collection of model ships. I built those ships by hand, hours of sanding and gluing, tiny details that quieted my mind after long days of war in the boardroom. He picked up the schooner, the one that took me 6 months to finish. He cut you off, Mikhail screamed. He cut us off. That old bastard shut down the cards. He threw the ship against the wall. It shattered. Wood and string and canvas exploded across the floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent house. Kyle, stop it, Beatrice shrieked. But she didn't move to stop him. She was paralyzed by the reality crashing down on her. No money meant no power. No money meant she was just a 62-year-old woman with a mortgage she couldn't pay and a son who couldn't hold a job. Tiffany watched the destruction with cold eyes. She didn't look scared. She looked annoyed. She looked at Beatrice with pure contempt. I could see the gears turning in her head. She realized she had bet on the wrong horse. She thought Beatrice had the keys to the kingdom, but Beatrice was just the jester. You said you had access, Beatrice Tiffany said, her voice sharp as broken glass. You said you were a co-owner. Co-owners don't get their allowance cut off like naughty children. Shut up, Tiffany, Beatrice yelled. She was pacing the room now, clutching the useless black card. He can't do this. It is illegal. It is financial abuse. I will sue him. You can't sue him if you can't pay a lawyer, Kyle shouted. He kicked a piece of the broken ship across the room. We need money now. We have debts, Ma. The guys I owe, they don't take credit cards. They take cash. Cash. The word hung in the air. Beatrice stopped pacing. She looked at the heavy oak door of my study, my sanctuary. The room she was never allowed to enter without knocking. The safe, she whispered. She turned to them, her eyes wild. He keeps cash in the safe, in the wall safe behind the painting. He always keeps emergency funds. Thousands, maybe more. Kyle's eyes lit up. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. Do you have the combination? Beatrice's face fell. No. He never gave it to me. He said it was for business security. Kyle let out a roar of frustration and grabbed a heavy brass lamp from the table. He marched toward the study door. I don't need a combination, he yelled. I will smash it open. No. Tiffany stepped in front of him. She put a hand on his chest. Stop acting like a caveman, Kyle. You can't smash a titanium safe with a lamp. You will just make noise and attract the neighbors. Then what do we do? Beatrice cried. We need that money. Tiffany pulled out her phone again. She was calm, terrifyingly calm. We do this smart. We call a professional. She searched for a number. Here, a 24-hour locksmith, emergency services. We tell them the lock is jammed. We tell them you are the owner and you forgot the code. You have your ID right, Beatrice. The address matches. Yes. Beatrice nodded, wiping tears from her face. Yes, it matches. Call them, Tiffany ordered. Tell them to bring the heavy drill. Beatrice dialed the number. She put on her best distressed damsel voice, the voice she used to hook me 5 years ago. Hello? Yes, I have an emergency. My husband. He had a stroke. Yes, it is terrible. I need to get into our safe to get his medical directives. Please hurry. Money is no object. I sat in the bunker and listened to the silence after she hung up. They were going to drill into my safe. They thought they were going to find stacks of $100 bills. They thought they were going to find salvation. They didn't know that the safe was empty of cash. They didn't know that the only thing inside that steel box was a folder of documents and a single USB drive. A drive containing footage that would turn Kyle from a deadbeat into a felon. Go ahead, Beatrice, I whispered to the empty air. Drill it open. You are not opening a bank vault. You are opening Pandora's box. I poured myself a glass of cheap whiskey from the bottle in my desk drawer. It wasn't Dom Perignon. It burned going down. But it tasted like justice. I checked my watch. The locksmith would be there in 30 minutes. The nightmare was just beginning for them. And I had a front row seat. The sound of the drill biting into hardened steel is a noise you never forget. It is a high-pitched scream of metal against metal, a violent intrusion that grates against your teeth and vibrates in your bones. I was not there to hear it, but I know exactly what it sounded like. I know because I bought that safe 20 years ago from a German manufacturer who promised me it could withstand a fire, a flood, and a bomb. He never mentioned if it could withstand the desperation of a greedy family. The locksmith was probably a guy named Mike or Steve, just doing his job, charging double for the emergency night call. He was kneeling on the floor of my study, sweating through his shirt, while Beatrice, Kyle, and Tiffany stood over him like vultures waiting for a carcass to open up. They were holding their breath, Their eyes were fixed on that silver handle. In their minds, they were already spending the money. Beatrice was probably visualizing stacks of $100 bills tied in rubber bands the way they do in the movies. Kyle was likely imagining gold bars, or maybe loose diamonds. They had convinced themselves that I was an old miser hoarding millions in cash right under their noses. They didn't understand how wealth works. Real wealth isn't stacks of papers sitting in a box waiting to rot. Real wealth is leverage. Real wealth is information. And that safe was full of it. "Got it," the locksmith grunted. The drill stopped. The silence that followed must have been heavy enough to crush a man. He stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. "It is open. That will be $400 cash." Kyle didn't even look at him. He shoved past the man and grabbed the handle. He yanked the heavy steel door open so hard it banged against the mahogany paneling of the wall. Beatrice gasped. Tiffany leaned in, her eyes wide. They looked into the dark cavern of the safe, and they saw nothing. Well, not nothing. There was dust. There was the smell of old paper and cold steel, but there was no green, no gold, no diamonds. "Where is it?" Kyle screamed. His voice cracked. He reached inside frantically, patting down the empty metal shelves as if the money might be invisible, as if I had hidden it in the fourth dimension. "It has to be here. She said he keeps emergency funds." Beatrice was trembling. Her face went pale. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I saw him put things in here. I saw him open it last month. He always keeps cash. He doesn't trust banks. He doesn't trust you." Tiffany corrected, her voice sharp with disappointment. She crossed her arms. The scalpel was out again. "He knew, Beatrice. He knew you would try this eventually. The old man is smarter than you think." "Shut up!" Kyle yelled. He was pulling the only things left in the safe out onto the floor. There were two items. One was a thick manila folder tied with a string. The other was a small silver USB drive taped to the back of the folder. Kyle grabbed the folder and ripped it open. Papers flew everywhere. They were deeds, titles, insurance policies. But they were all copies, not originals, just photocopies of things I owned, things they could never touch. "What is this junk?" Kyle spat, throwing the papers down. "Where is the money?" Tiffany bent down and picked up the USB drive. She held it up to the light. It was small, innocuous, just a piece of plastic and metal, but to me it was heavier than any gold bar. "Maybe the accounts are on here," she said. "Maybe it is a crypto wallet, or offshore banking codes." Kyle's eyes lit up again. "Hope is a dangerous drug for a fool." "Give it to me," he demanded, snatching the drive from her hand. He ran to my desk. He sat in my chair and flipped open my laptop, which I had left behind. He jammed the drive into the port. His fingers were shaking so bad he missed the slot twice. Beatrice stood behind him, clutching his shoulder. "Hurry, baby," she said. "Hurry." I can imagine the glow of the screen illuminating their faces. The folder opened on the desktop. There was only one file. It was a video file. It was titled simply Tuesday. Kyle clicked it. They were expecting a spreadsheet. They were expecting a list of passwords. Instead, a video player popped up. The footage was grainy black and white, but clear enough. It was from a hidden camera, a camera I had installed in the eye of the taxidermy eagle that sits on the bookshelf behind my desk. I installed it 6 months ago, and I started noticing small things going missing. A cufflink here, a signed baseball there. The video on the screen showed this very room. The timestamp in the corner read, 3 weeks ago. The door opened in the video. A figure walked in. It wasn't me, it was Kyle. He looked nervous. He kept looking over his shoulder at the door. He walked straight to my desk. He opened the top drawer. He rifled through it until he found what he was looking for. My gold Rolex. The President Day date. The one I bought to celebrate my first million. It was heavy, solid 18-karat gold. On the screen, Kyle slipped the watch into his pocket. He smiled. A nasty, self-satisfied smirk. Then he walked out. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the room was absolute. Kyle stared at his own reflection in the dark screen. The blood drained from his face. He looked like a ghost. Beatrice took her hand off his shoulder as if he was burning hot. Tiffany let out a breath that sounded like a hiss. "Oh my God," she whispered. "He knows." Kyle spun around in the chair. That is fake. He doctored it. It is a deep fake." "Don't be an idiot," Tiffany snapped. Her eyes were darting around the room, scanning the corners, the bookshelves, the ceiling. "He has cameras. He has been watching us. He saw you steal the watch." "That is grand larceny, Kyle." That is a felony. Kyle stood up, knocking the chair over. So what? He is my stepfather. He can't arrest me. It is a family matter. It is evidence, Tiffany said, her voice rising in panic. Don't you get it? He left this for us to find. He wanted us to open the safe. It is a trap. He knew we would come for the money, and he left a landmine instead. She grabbed her purse. I am leaving. I am not going to be an accessory to this. If he goes to the police... Beatrice finally found her voice. It was shaky, but loud. Stop it. Nobody is going to the police. She stepped between Tiffany and the door. She looked desperate, trying to regain control of a ship that was already sinking. Isaiah is an old man, she said, trying to sound convinced. He is playing games. He is trying to scare us. He won't turn Kyle in. He wouldn't dare. The scandal would ruin his reputation. Think about it, Tiffany. The great Isaiah Freeman arresting his own stepson. He has too much pride. Tiffany narrowed her eyes. He walked out, Beatrice. He left his house. He left his car. Does that look like a man who cares about pride anymore? He looks like a man who is burning bridges. He abandoned me, Beatrice shouted. She slammed her hand on the desk. The law protects the wife. I have rights. He walked out on his sick wife. Well, I am sick now from the stress. I will sue him for spousal abandonment. I will sue him for emotional distress. I will tell the judge he planted that camera to spy on me in my private moments. She was spiraling, making up laws that didn't exist, clinging to the victim card like it was a life raft. Tiffany looked at her mother-in-law with a mixture of pity and disgust. You are delusional, she said, but she didn't leave. Greed is a powerful anchor. Kyle was pacing the room, running his hands through his hair. Forget the video, he muttered. Forget the police. We have a bigger problem. The locksmith. He is downstairs waiting for his $400. And we don't have it. Beatrice looked at the empty safe. Then she looked around the room. She looked at the painting on the wall. A landscape of the Chicago skyline I bought at an auction for $5,000. She looked at the bronze statue on the pedestal. She looked at the Persian rug under their feet. We have plenty of money, Beatrice said. Her eyes went cold. She walked over to the painting and pulled it off the wall. The frame scraped against the plaster. This is my house, she said, holding the painting like a shield. Everything in it is marital property. If he won't give us cash, we will make our own. What are you doing? Kyle asked. I am liquidating assets, Beatrice declared. She marched toward the door. Kyle, help me carry this downstairs. Tiffany, find a buyer. There are pawn shops that stay open late. Or listing sites. I don't care. You want to sell his art? Tiffany asked, skeptical but intrigued. Our art, Beatrice corrected. Sell the painting, sell the statues. Sell the silverware in the kitchen. Sell the damn television if you have to. But Ma, Kyle stammered. If we sell his stuff, isn't that what Beatrice spun around, her eyes blazing? Stealing, no, it is survival. He forced us to do this. He cut us off. He owes us this. She walked out into the hallway carrying my painting. Kyle hesitated for a second, looking at the black laptop screen where his crime was recorded. Then he shrugged. The desperation outweighed the fear. He grabbed the bronze statue and followed his mother. Tiffany stood alone in my study for a moment. She looked at the hidden camera in the eagle's eye. She knew it was there now. She stared right into the lens, right at me, even though she couldn't see me. She raised her middle finger. Then she turned and followed them to help strip my life down to the bone. I poured another drink in the bunker. Let them sell it. Let them sell the paintings and the rugs. Let them sell the silver spoons. They were selling the furniture on the deck of the Titanic, and they didn't even know the ship had already hit the iceberg. Every item they sold was another nail in their coffin. Every pawn shop receipt was another piece of evidence for Marcus. Go ahead, Beatrice, I whispered. Make your $400. You are going to need it for the bail bondsman. 3 days. That is how long it took for the silence to break. For 72 hours I stayed in the bunker, watching the grain of the concrete ceiling and listening to the hum of the ventilation system. I didn't call, I didn't text. I let them sit in the stew of their own anxiety. I knew exactly what was happening in that house on Lakeshore Drive. The panic was setting in like rot in a damp wall. They had sold the painting. They had pawned the silver. They were eating takeout on paper plates because they had sold the good china to a dealer from the West Loop. They were stripping the meat off the bone of my life, trying to gather enough cash to keep their illusion afloat. They were waiting for me to come back. They were waiting for the police. But I sent neither. I sent Mr. Henderson. It was a gray Thursday afternoon when the car pulled up. It wasn't a police cruiser and it wasn't a taxi. It was a black Lincoln Town car with tinted windows and tires that looked like they had been shined with shoe polish. It sat at the curb, idling with a low rumble that vibrated in the chest. It looked like a hearse designed for the living. Inside the house, Beatrice must have seen it from the window. I can imagine her reaction. She probably smoothed her hair and checked her makeup in the hall mirror. She thought it was a buyer. She had listed my grand piano on an estate sale website that morning. She was expecting someone with a truck and a checkbook. She put on her best smile, the one she uses to charm waiters and manipulate husbands. She opened the front door before the bell even rang. The man who stepped out of the car was not looking for a piano. Mr. Henderson is a white man in his late 50s. He wears charcoal gray suits that cost more than Kyle's entire wardrobe. He has eyes the color of dirty ice, and he never smiles. Not ever. I hired Henderson 20 years ago to handle the parts of my business that required a scalpel instead of a hammer. He is the head of compliance for Freeman Holdings. He is the man who fires people. He is the man who evicts tenants who destroy property. He is a shark who forgot how to swim and learned how to walk. He walked up the driveway carrying a thin leather briefcase. He didn't look at the manicured lawn. He didn't look at the flower beds Beatrice was so proud of. He looked at the house the way a butcher looks at a cow. Beatrice stood in the doorway, beaming. "Hello," she chirped. "You must be here for the Steinway. It is in excellent condition. We are just downsizing, moving to a warmer climate." Henderson stopped at the bottom of the steps. He looked up at her. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't offer a hand to shake. "Mrs. Freeman," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of any human warmth. "Yes," Beatrice said, faltering slightly. "And you are—" "I am Arthur Henderson. I am the Director of Asset Protection for Freeman Holdings." Beatrice's smile wavered. "Freeman Holdings. You work for Isaiah. I work for the trust," Henderson corrected. He walked past her up the steps. He didn't ask for permission to enter. He simply occupied the space as if gravity bent around him. Beatrice scrambled backward to let him in, confused and suddenly wary. "Is Isaiah with you? Did he send you? Tell him he can't just send his employees to spy on me. I want to speak to my husband." Henderson stood in the foyer. He looked at the empty spot on the wall where the painting used to be. He looked at the scratches on the floor where the statue had been dragged away. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket and made a note. "Mr. Freeman is not available," Henderson said without looking up. "I am not here to deliver a message. I am here to conduct a preliminary inventory of the trust's assets before we initiate the sealing of the property." Beatrice laughed. It was a high, shrill sound that bounced off the high ceilings. "Sealing the property. You must be joking. This is my house. My name is on the deed. Isaiah put it there 5 years ago. You can check the records." Henderson finally looked at her. It was a look of profound boredom. "I am aware of the deed, Mrs. Freeman. I drafted it." He walked into the living room, running a gloved hand over the back of the sofa. Kyle and Tiffany came down the stairs, drawn by the voices. Kyle looked hungover. Tiffany looked suspicious. "Who is this guy?" Kyle demanded, puffing out his chest, trying to look tough. "This is the man who is going to explain to you the difference between ownership and possession," Tiffany said quietly. She was smarter than them. She smelled the danger. Henderson ignored them. He placed his briefcase on the coffee table and clicked the latches open. The sound was loud in the quiet room. He pulled out a document. It was thick, bound in blue paper. "You are correct," Mrs. Freeman, Henderson said. "Your name is on the deed for the structure known as 124 Lakeshore Drive. You possess the right of use and survivorship." Beatrice crossed her arms, triumphant. "Exactly. So get out of my house before I call the police." "However," Henderson continued, his voice dropping a few degrees, "you do not own the land. The land this house sits on is owned by the Freeman Family Irrevocable Trust, established in 1998. The house is considered an improvement on the land. And according to the master lease agreement between the trust and the occupants, there are specific clauses regarding conduct." He turned the document around and pointed to a paragraph highlighted in yellow. Clause 19B. Beatrice read out loud, her voice shaking. "The revocation of privileges." Clause 19B. Henderson recited from memory. "Any act of physical violence, domestic abuse or endangerment committed by a tenant or beneficiary against the primary grantor of the trust immediately nullifies the right of use. The property reverts to the sole control of the trust for the purpose of asset preservation. Beatrice stared at the paper. The words were swimming before her eyes. Violence. What are you talking about? There was no violence. We had an argument. He left. He is the one who abandoned the home. Henderson reached into his briefcase again. This time, he didn't pull out a contract. He pulled out a glossy photograph. It was 8 by 10 inches. He laid it on the table next to the contract. It was the photo Dr. Sam had taken 3 days ago. My face. The blistering skin. The red, raw flesh peeling away from my cheekbone. The burn pattern that clearly showed a liquid splash. We have the medical report from Dr. Samuel Evans, Henderson said. Second-degree burns caused by a boiling liquid. We have the sworn affidavit from Mr. Freeman, stating that you threw a pot of coffee at him with the intent to cause bodily harm. Beatrice gasped. She put her hand over her mouth. No, I didn't mean... It was an accident. I was just angry. I didn't think it would hit him. Intent does not matter to the trust, Henderson said. The result matters. You assaulted the grantor in the residence. That triggers an immediate breach of the lease. Kyle stepped forward. This is bullshit. You can't kick us out because of a little coffee. My mom owns this place. Henderson turned to Kyle. He looked at the 35-year-old man like he was a stain on the carpet. And you must be Kyle. We have a separate file for you regarding the unauthorized liquidation of assets. He pointed to the empty wall. Selling property that belongs to the trust is considered theft by conversion. We are currently compiling a list of missing items: the painting, the bronze sculpture, the vintage silverware. We will be cross-referencing with local pawn shops and online listings. Tiffany grabbed Kyle's arm and pulled him back. Shut up, Kyle, she hissed. Just shut up. Henderson closed his briefcase. The click was final. Here is the situation, Mrs. Freeman. You have been served notice. The trust has initiated the eviction protocol under Clause 19B. Eviction. Beatrice whispered, tears streaming down her face. But we have nowhere to go. This is my home. Isaiah promised to provide for a wife, Henderson said, cold as ice. Not an assailant. He checked his watch. A Rolex. Unlike the one Kyle stole, this one was earned. You have 48 hours. 48 hours for what Beatrice pleaded. To move out. No, Henderson said. You have 48 hours to submit a formal written explanation for the assault documented in this medical report. If you can prove that Mr. Freeman caused his own injuries, or that it was an act of self-defense, the trust may pause the proceedings. Self-defense, Beatrice stammered. But he didn't hit me. Then you have a problem, Henderson said. He walked toward the door. He stopped at the threshold and looked back at the terrified trio standing in the ruins of their own greed. In 48 hours, a security team will arrive to secure the perimeter. They will change the locks. They will install a new alarm system. Anyone found on the premises after that time will be treated as a trespasser. But my things, Beatrice cried, running after him. My clothes, my furniture. Personal items purchased with your own independent funds may be removed, Henderson said. Anything purchased with Mr. Freeman's accounts or the joint accounts remains the property of the trust until the forensic audit is complete. He opened the door. Good day, Mrs. Freeman. He stepped out and closed the door. Inside the house, silence descended again. But this time, it wasn't the silence of victory. It was the silence of a tomb. Beatrice looked at the photo of my burned face on the table. She looked at the blue legal document. She looked at Kyle, who was pale and shaking. 48 hours, she whispered. She collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. Tiffany stood by the window, watching Henderson's black car drive away. She turned to look at her husband and her mother-in-law. You idiots, she said softly. You didn't just burn his face. You burned the only parachute we had. I sat in the bunker and poured another drink. I didn't need to be there to see it. I knew Henderson. I knew he would leave them with just enough hope to make them panic and just enough rope to hang themselves. 48 hours. The clock was ticking, and I was just getting started. The door had barely clicked shut behind Mr. Henderson before the screaming started. I wasn't there to hear it, but I know the acoustic of that foyer perfectly. I know how sound bounces off the marble floors and the high ceilings. For 5 years I listened to their fake laughter and their whispered plots in that hallway. But now the whispers were gone. The mask of the happy family had been ripped off by a single eviction notice, and underneath was nothing but ugly, raw panic. Tiffany was the first to snap. I can imagine her pacing back and forth, her heels clicking like gunshots on the tile. She looked at the 48-hour notice lying on the table like it was a venomous snake. The reality of her situation was crashing down on her. She wasn't going to be the mistress of a mansion. She was going to be homeless. And for a woman like Tiffany, who measures her self-worth by the labels on her handbags and the envy of her friends, that was a fate worse than death. She turned on Kyle. My stepson was probably slumped on the stairs, head in his hands, looking like a child who lost his balloon. "You are useless," Tiffany screamed. Her voice wasn't the sweet syrup she used on me. It was a razor. You sat there and let him talk to us like we were criminals. You let him threaten us with police. Why didn't you do something? Why didn't you punch him? Kyle looked up, his eyes red and watery. Punch him? Did you see the guy? He looks like he eats glass for breakfast. And he works for the Trust Tiffany. If I touched him, I would go to jail for real this time. You are already going to jail, you idiot, she yelled. She kicked his shin, hard. You stole the watch, you stole the car, and now we are getting evicted because you couldn't keep your hands out of the cookie jar. Hey, don't talk to him like that, Beatrice interjected. My wife tried to step in, tried to reclaim her position as the matriarch. She puffed up her chest, trying to look authoritative. We are in this together, Tiffany. We need to stay calm and think of a plan. Tiffany spun around and looked at Beatrice. The look on her face was pure, unadulterated loathing. The racial dynamic that she had carefully suppressed under layers of polite smiles and shared shopping trips suddenly bubbled to the surface. Shut up, you stupid old woman, Tiffany spat. The room must have gone silent. Beatrice froze. In 5 years, Tiffany had never raised her voice at her. She had manipulated her, used her, and mocked her behind her back, but she had never insulted her to her face. Excuse me, Beatrice whispered, her hand going to her throat. You heard me, Tiffany said, stepping closer, invading Beatrice's personal space. You are a stupid, gullible old woman. You told us you owned the house. You told us you had control. You walked around like you were the Queen of Chicago, but you were just a glorified tenant. You lost the gold mine, Beatrice. You had a millionaire husband who paid for everything, and you blew it because you couldn't control your temper. I didn't blow it, Beatrice stammered, tears welling up. I was defending my son. You threw hot coffee at him. Tiffany laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. You assaulted the meal ticket, and now look at us. We have 48 hours to get out. Do you have a place for us to stay, Beatrice? Do you have a secret mansion tucked away somewhere? Or are we going to a shelter because you wanted to play tough guy? Beatrice crumbled. The illusion of power she had clung to for so long evaporated. She sank onto the bottom step next to her son. I thought he would just give in, she sobbed. He always gives in. Tiffany looked at the two of them, the mother and son huddled together in their defeat. She realized she was alone. The alliance was broken. She had betting on them, and she had lost. But Tiffany is a survivor. She's a cockroach in designer clothing. She realized that fighting them wouldn't solve the immediate problem. She needed a roof over her head, and the only person who could give her that was the man she had just spent 3 days robbing. Call him, Tiffany ordered. Kyle looked up, wiping his nose. Who? Henderson. No, you moron. Call Isaiah. Beatrice shook her head. He won't pick up. I tried. He hates us. He doesn't hate you, Tiffany said, her mind working fast, spinning a new web. He is an old man. He is hurt. He is probably lonely and scared wherever he is. Men like him want to be the hero. They want to be the provider. If we call him and beg, if we apologize, if we sound pathetic enough, he might call off the dogs. She grabbed Kyle's phone and shoved it into his chest. Call him. Put it on speaker. And for God's sake, Kyle sounds sad. Cry if you have to. Tell him you were sorry. Tell him you were drunk. Tell him anything, just get him to stop the eviction. Kyle looked at the phone. He looked at his mother. Beatrice nodded weakly. It was their last hope. I was in the bunker sitting across from Marcus. We were eating takeout from a styrofoam box. The room was dim lit only by the desk lamp and the glow of the monitors. My phone buzzed on the desk. Kyle calling. Marcus looked at me. He raised an eyebrow. Do you want me to answer it, Mr. Freeman? No, I said. I wiped my mouth with a paper napkin. I picked up the phone. I looked at the screen. I let it ring 3 times. I needed them to sweat. I needed them to think I was hesitating. Then I answered. But I didn't answer as Ike the Iron. I didn't answer as the man who was burning their world down. I answered as the man they thought I was. I pitched my voice up a little. I added a tremor. I made my breathing sound shallow and raspy. Hello, is that you, Kyle? The voice on the other end was frantic. Dad. Oh my God, Dad, are you okay? We have been so worried. Where are you? I looked at Marcus and winked. I am at the hospital, son, I lied. My voice was weak. The burns. They got infected. The doctors gave me some strong medicine. My head is spinning a bit. I heard a gasp on the other end. Beatrice's voice. Oh, Isaiah. Oh, honey, I am so sorry, I didn't mean it. Is it bad? It hurts, Beatrice, I said, letting a little whimper creep into my tone. It hurts real bad. I don't know why you did that to me. I just wanted to have breakfast. We know, Dad, we know. Kyle said, rushing his words. We are so sorry. We were just stressed. Ma didn't mean it. Look, we need you to come home. You need to come home so we can take care of you. We can nurse you back to health. I paused. I let the silence stretch out. I don't know, I said slowly. That man, Mr. Henderson, he said I can't go back. He said the house is locked. No. Tiffany's voice cut in. She must have grabbed the phone. Her voice was pure sugar. It was sickening. That man is crazy, Dad. He came here and threatened us. He said he was kicking us out. You didn't tell him to do that, did you? You wouldn't do that to your family. I pretended to be confused. Henderson, I don't remember telling him that. I told him to check on the house. Maybe he misunderstood. My memory is a little fuzzy with these pills. See, Tiffany exclaimed triumphantly to the others in the room. I told you, it is a misunderstanding. Dad, listen to me, she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You need to tell him to stop. He gave us 48 hours. You need to come home and fix this. We love you. We miss you. We can't be a family if you are in the hospital and we are on the street. I leaned back in my chair. This was the moment. If I pushed too hard, they would run. If I was too soft, they would get suspicious. I needed to plant the seed that would keep them rooted to the spot until the trap snapped shut. Listen, Tiffany, I said, coughing a little. Don't worry about Henderson. He is just overzealous. I will call him. I will tell him to stand down. Really? Beatrice sobbed in the background. Oh, thank you, Isaiah. Thank you. But I can't do it right now, I added quickly. The doctors, they are coming to change my dressings. I have to go. You guys just stay put. Stay in the house. Don't leave. If you leave, the alarm might trigger. Just stay there and wait for me. I will be home in a day or two when they release me. Okay. Yes, Dad. Yes, Kyle said. We won't go anywhere. We will be right here waiting for you. We will make your favorite dinner. Just get better. Okay. Okay, son. I let the sentence trail off as if I was too weak to finish it. I love you too, Dad, Kyle said. Tiffany took the phone back. We love you, Isaiah. Hurry home. I hung up. The room in the bunker was silent. Marcus was staring at me. He had stopped eating. He looked impressed and a little terrified. Mr. Freeman, he said softly. That was cold. I put the phone down on the desk. My face was still throbbing under the bandage, but I didn't feel the pain anymore. I felt the cold satisfaction of a chess player who just watched his opponent move their queen into the line of fire. They are staying, I said. My voice dropped back to its normal deep timbre. The tremor was gone. The weakness was gone. They are going to stay in that house, Marcus. They are going to ignore the eviction notice because they think Daddy is coming home to fix everything. They are going to sit on that sofa and wait for me. And when the 48 hours are up, Marcus asked. I poured myself a glass of water. When the 48 hours are up, they won't be trespassers who just missed a deadline. They will be squatters who refused a direct legal order from the trust. And because I told them to stay, I have proof that they are manipulating a vulnerable old man. Marcus smiled, a slow shark-like smile. You just baited the trap with their own greed. Exactly, I said. Tiffany thinks she is smart. She thinks she can charm her way out of a contract. She thinks a few sweet words can erase a pot of boiling coffee. She called me stupid. She called Beatrice stupid. But the stupidest thing you can do is underestimate a man who has nothing left to lose. I checked the time. 40 hours left. Enjoy the house while you can. Tiffany, I whispered to the empty air, because the next place you stay won't have heated floors. I turned to Marcus. Get the security team ready. I want them there at hour 49, and tell them to bring the body cameras. I want every second of this recorded. You want to be there? Mr. Freeman, Marcus asked. No, I said. I don't need to be there. I have seen enough. But I was lying. I wanted to be there. I wanted to see the look on Tiffany's face when the police kicked down the door. But I knew that if I went, I might do something I would regret. I might show mercy, and mercy was a luxury I could no longer afford. I picked up the file Marcus had brought, the forensic audit of the household accounts. I started reading. It was worse than I thought. The jewelry, the cash withdrawals, the loans taken out in my name. Beatrice had been bleeding me dry for years. I felt a pang of sadness, not for the money, money comes and goes, but for the time, 5 years. 5 years of my life given to a woman who looked at me and saw nothing but an ATM machine. I turned the page. It was time to close the account. Permanently. The trap was set and the bait had been taken. Kyle was sitting in the house thinking he had won. He believed the lie I told him on the phone. He believed that I was a senile old man lying in a hospital bed ready to come home and forgive everything. And because he believed that he got comfortable. And when a man like Kyle gets comfortable, he gets careless. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The sun was shining on the Chicago skyline, reflecting off the glass towers that I helped build with my trucks and my sweat. Kyle decided he needed some fresh air. He decided he couldn't stay cooped up in the house anymore. He wanted to feel important again. He wanted to feel rich. So he went to the garage. He walked past his own beat-up sedan, the one I bought him 5 years ago that he never washed. He walked straight to my pride and joy. The black Mercedes S-Class, the company car. It belongs to Freeman Logistics. It is registered to the corporation, not to me personally. That is a distinction Kyle never bothered to learn, but it is a distinction that makes all the difference in a court of law. He grabbed the spare key from the hook in the mudroom. I watched him do it on the security feed from my laptop in the bunker. He was whistling. He spun the key on his finger. He thought he was borrowing his daddy's car to go get a burger. He didn't know he was stepping into a felony. He backed the car out of the driveway. He revved the engine, feeling the power of a $100,000 machine. He rolled the windows down. He put on his sunglasses. He looked like a man who owned the world. He drove down Lakeshore Drive, weaving in and out of traffic, playing his music loud so everyone could see him. I picked up my phone and called the precinct. I didn't call 911. I called the direct line of Detective Miller. We go back 20 years. I told him one simple sentence. The stolen company vehicle has just left the premises. 10 minutes later, Kyle was at a stoplight on Michigan Avenue. It is one of the busiest intersections in the city. Shoppers, tourists, business people, everyone was there. Kyle was bobbing his head to the music, drumming his fingers on the leather steering wheel. Then the lights flashed, blue and red bouncing off the rearview mirror. The siren chirped, that short, sharp sound that tells you to pull over immediately. Kyle didn't panic at first. I know him. He probably thought it was a speeding ticket. He probably thought he could talk his way out of it. He rolled his eyes and pulled over to the curb. He checked his hair in the mirror. He prepared his speech. Do you know who my father is? That is his favorite line. But the officer didn't walk up to the window with a ticket book. 3 squad cars boxed him in. 1 in front, 1 behind, 1 on the side. 4 officers stepped out, hands on their holsters. Step out of the vehicle, the lead officer shouted. Kyle froze. He looked around. People on the sidewalk were stopping to watch. Phone cameras were coming out. I said, step out of the vehicle now. Kyle opened the door. His legs were shaking. What is going on? He stammered. This is my dad's car. I am Isaiah Freeman's son. Get on the ground. They didn't care about his last name. They cared about the license plate. That plate was flagged in the system as a stolen vehicle involved in an active investigation. Kyle hit the pavement. He was wearing his expensive designer jeans, the ones he bought with my money. Now they were grinding into the dirty Chicago asphalt. He felt the cold steel of the handcuffs click around his wrists. He started crying. not a silent, dignified cry. He was wailing. "Call my dad," he screamed as they shoved him into the back of the cruiser. "Call Isaiah. He will tell you." I watched the footage later. A bystander posted it on social media. It had 5,000 views in an hour. The caption read, "Rich kid gets taken down." I drank my whiskey and watched it 3 times. They took him to the precinct. They processed him. Fingerprints, mugshot, the whole 9 yards. They put him in a holding cell with a guy who looked like he ate drywall for breakfast. Kyle sat in the corner trying to make himself invisible. He used his one phone call to call Beatrice. She was hysterical. She screamed. She promised to fix it. Then she called Marcus because I still wasn't picking up. An hour later, Marcus walked into the precinct. He wasn't there to defend Kyle. He was there to represent the owner of the vehicle. Kyle saw him through the bars and jumped up. "Marcus, thank God, tell them it is a mistake. Tell them I have permission." Marcus adjusted his silk tie. He looked at Kyle with the same expression one might look at a cockroach on a restaurant floor. "I can't do that," Kyle Marcus said smoothly, "because you don't have permission." "What are you talking about?" Kyle yelled. "It is Dad's car. He lets me drive it all the time." "It is a corporate asset," Marcus corrected, "and you are not an employee of Freeman Logistics. You are an unauthorized user. That is Grand Theft Auto Kyle. That is a Class 2 felony." The detective walked over. He looked tired. "Look, counselor, the kid says it is a family dispute. He says his dad is in the hospital and gave him verbal permission. If that is true, we can't hold him. We need to know if the owner wants to press charges." Marcus smiled. He reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a tablet. "Mr. Freeman is very much clear on his position," Marcus said. "He wants to press charges to the fullest extent of the law. And before you consider releasing him on his own recognizance thinking this is just a misunderstanding, let me show you something that speaks to the suspect's character." He placed the tablet on the desk. He pressed play. It was the video from the safe. The video of Kyle stealing my Rolex. The detective watched it. He watched Kyle look over his shoulder. He watched the greed in his eyes. He watched the theft. "This was taken 3 weeks ago," Marcus explained. "The watch is valued at $40,000. We haven't filed that report yet because Mr. Freeman was hoping to handle it privately. But given today's events, it is clear that Mr. Kyle creates a pattern of criminal behavior. He is a habitual thief detective. If you let him go, he will steal again." The detective looked at Kyle. Then he looked at the video. He nodded slowly. "Book him for the car," he said to the sergeant. "And add a charge for the watch." "No," Kyle screamed. "That is a lie. I didn't steal it. I was borrowing it." "Save it for the judge, kid," the detective said. Beatrice arrived 20 minutes later. She looked like a wreck. Her hair was messy. Her eyes were swollen. Tiffany was with her, but Tiffany looked annoyed rather than worried. "Where is he?" Beatrice demanded, rushing up to the front desk. "Where is my son? I want to see him." "He is being processed, ma'am," the sergeant said. "Bail is set at $50,000. 10% cash required for release." "That is $5,000. $5,000. Beatrice gasped. She looked at Tiffany. "Tiffany, you have money saved. You have that account your father gave you." Tiffany laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "You want me to pay $5,000 because your son wanted to joyride in a stolen car? No way. He is your husband," Beatrice shrieked. "He is a criminal," Tiffany hissed. "Did you hear what the lawyer said? He stole the watch too. I knew he took it. He told me he found it. I am not spending my inheritance on his bail." "Beatrice, I am saving that money for a divorce lawyer." Beatrice looked at her like she had been slapped. The alliance was crumbling faster than a sandcastle in a hurricane. She turned back to the sergeant. Her hands were shaking. She reached into her purse. She pulled out a small checkbook. It wasn't the joint account book. It wasn't the one connected to my money. It was a small red book. This was her secret stash, the money she had been skimming off the grocery budget for 5 years, the money she hid from me, the money she planned to use for a vacation without me. "I will write a check," she whispered. "Cash or certified check only, ma'am," the sergeant said. Beatrice started to cry. She had to leave the station. She had to go to the bank. She had to drain her secret account. Every dollar she spent to free Kyle was a dollar she had stolen from me in the first place. It was poetic justice. She was paying for her son's freedom with the evidence of her own betrayal. By the time she came back with the cash, it was dark. Kyle walked out of the holding cell smelling like sweat and fear. He hugged his mother. Beatrice cried. Tiffany stood by the door texting on her phone, refusing to look at him. They walked out of the precinct into the cold Chicago night. They didn't have the Mercedes. They had to take a taxi. I sat in the bunker and watched the GPS tracker on the Mercedes beep as the tow truck took it back to the company impound lot. One car recovered. One son with a criminal record. One secret bank account drained. I poured the last of the whiskey. Go home, Beatrice, I thought. Go home and sleep well. Because tomorrow morning I am coming for the rest. While Beatrice was draining her secret savings account to bail her son out of jail, I was sitting in the bunker doing what I do best. Due diligence. In my world, you never go into a war without knowing exactly who is funding the enemy. Kyle had asked me for $200,000 for a crypto startup called Crypto Harvest. He called it the future. He called it a guaranteed return. I call it a red flag the size of a billboard. I pulled up the file on my triple monitor setup. I didn't need Google. I needed the dark corners of the financial world where the rats hide. I called an old associate of mine, a guy named Benny who runs a forensic accounting firm in the Loop. Benny owes me his career after I saved him from a nasty embezzlement charge in the 90s. Benny, I said, tell me about Crypto Harvest. There was a long pause on the line. Then Benny laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Ike, if you are thinking of investing, save your money. It is not a startup. It is a slaughterhouse. Break it down for me, I said, leaning back in my leather chair. It is a classic Ponzi, Ike. High-yield investment program. They promise 20% monthly returns paid out from new investors' money. They have been running it for 6 months. They are at the collapse phase. They are desperate for fresh blood to pay off the early adopters before the whole thing implodes. I looked at the graph Tiffany had shown me on her tablet. The line going straight up. It wasn't profit. It was a lie designed to catch idiots. But here is the interesting part, Benny continued. I pulled the investor list. Guess who is deep in the hole I didn't have to guess? Tiffany, I said. Bingo. Tiffany Reynolds. She put in 50 grand of her own money 3 months ago, probably her entire savings. She hasn't seen a dime back. The system has her locked out. The only way she gets her principal back is if she brings in a whale, a big investor. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with a satisfying snap. The desperation, the aggression, the way she pushed Beatrice to ask for the credit card. Tiffany wasn't just a greedy daughter-in-law looking for a shopping spree. She was a drowning woman trying to climb on top of my head to keep from going under. She had lost her money to a scam, and instead of admitting it, she decided to scam me to cover her losses. She was willing to sacrifice my retirement to save her own skin. Thank you, Benny, I said. Send me the name of the guy running the Chicago branch. His name is Silas Vane, Benny said. He operates out of a boiler room in Gary, Indiana. Nasty piece of work. Loan sharking on the side. I hung up. Silas Vane. I knew the type. Wannabe gangster in a cheap suit. I could have called the SEC. I could have called the FBI. They would have raided the place, shut down the servers, and arrested everyone, including Tiffany. But that would have been too easy. That would have been mercy. Tiffany would have played the victim. She would have cried to the judge that she was duped. No, I wanted something more permanent. I wanted total control. I put on my coat. I didn't take the rolls. I took the old Ford truck I keep at the yard, the one with the dented bumper and the faded paint. I drove across the state line to Gary. It is a bleak drive past rusting steel mills and abandoned houses. It fits the mood of a man who is buying souls. I found Silas Vane's office in the back of a strip mall between a liquor store and a pawn shop. I walked in. 2 heavy guys stood by the door. They looked at me like I was lost. "Help you, Gramps," one of them sneered. I didn't stop walking. I walked straight past them, kicking the door to the inner office open. Silas Vane was sitting behind a desk counting a stack of cash. He looked up startled. He reached for a drawer. "Don't," I said. My voice filled the small room. "I am not the police. And I am not a customer. I am Isaiah Freeman." His hand stopped. He knew the name. Everyone who moves money in the Midwest knows the name Freeman. "Mr. Freeman," Silas stammered. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" I sat down in the chair opposite him. I looked at the cheap wood paneling. I looked at the sweat on his forehead. "You hold a debt ledger," I said. "A list of investors who bought into your little crypto harvest scheme on margin. People who borrowed money from your organization to invest in your fake coins." Silas narrowed his eyes. "That is proprietary business information." I pulled a thick envelope from my jacket pocket. I tossed it on the desk. It landed with a heavy thud. There is $50,000 in there, I said. Cash. Unmarked. Silas looked at the envelope. Greed warred with suspicion in his eyes. What do you want for it? I want the paper on two of your clients, I said. Kyle Freeman and Tiffany Reynolds. Silas laughed. He relaxed a little. Those two. They are deadbeats, Mr. Freeman. Your son and his wife, right? They're into me for $100,000. They borrowed on margin thinking the coin would moon. It crashed. Now they are dodging my calls. I know I said. I want to buy their debt. Buy it, Silas asked, confused. You want to pay it off? You are a good father. I leaned forward. The shadows in the room seemed to gather around me. No, I said coldly. I am not paying it off. I am buying the note. I want you to transfer the debt to a holding company I control. North Star Collections. You sign over the rights to collect. You give me the promissory notes they signed. And you walk away with $50,000 today instead of chasing them for zero tomorrow. Silas stared at me. He saw the look in my eyes. It wasn't the look of a savior. It was the look of an executioner. He realized that I wasn't there to save them. I was there to own them. He picked up the envelope. He thumbed through the bills. It was real. You are a cold son of a bitch, Mr. Freeman, Silas said, grinning. I like you. He opened his safe and pulled out 2 files. He signed a transfer agreement I had Marcus draft up. He handed me the files. They are all yours, he said. Good luck collecting. The girl is a snake. I took the files. I didn't shake his hand. I drove back to Chicago with the paperwork on the passenger seat. I looked at the streetlights blurring past. I thought about Kyle and Tiffany sitting in my house, probably eating takeout, probably scheming about how to manipulate me when I came home from the hospital. They didn't know that the ground had shifted beneath their feet. They were worried about Mr. Henderson kicking them out of the house. They were worried about the police charging Kyle with theft. But those were small problems. The real problem was that they owed $100,000 to a shadow company called North Star Collections. And North Star Collections doesn't negotiate payment plans. North Star Collections doesn't care about family ties. I was now their landlord. I was their victim. And as of tonight, I was their loan shark. I parked the truck at the bunker and walked up the metal stairs. I threw the files on the desk next to the eviction notice and the police report. 3 strikes, I whispered. I poured a drink and looked at the picture of Tiffany on the cover of her file. She looked so confident, so smug. You wanted to bring a whale into the deal, Tiffany, I said to the photo. Well, you got one. But you forgot that whales don't just swim. They swallow things whole. I picked up the phone and called Marcus. We have the debt, I said. Excellent, Marcus replied. When do you want to notify them? Not yet, I said. Let them stew for another day. Let them think they have handled the police. Let them think they have handled the eviction. Let them relax. And then, I said, taking a sip of the burning liquid we call in the loan. With interest. I looked at the date on the calendar. Tomorrow was the deadline. The 48 hours were almost up. The walls were closing in and they didn't even see the ceiling coming down. It is strange how calm you feel when you hold all the cards. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was the cold mechanical precision of the dismantlement. I wasn't just teaching them a lesson, I was rewriting their reality. I turned off the lights in the bunker, leaving only the glow of the monitors. The graph of crypto harvest was still on the screen, the line plunging down into the red. Down, 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 I hummed. Just like you, Kyle. Just like you. While I was busy buying their debts and tightening the noose around their financial necks, the atmosphere inside the house on Lakeshore Drive had turned toxic. I wasn't there to see it, but I know exactly what it looks like when rats run out of cheese. They start eating each other. It was the morning of the second day since the eviction notice. The 48-hour clock was ticking down like a bomb in the background, but they were too distracted by their own hunger to hear it. Beatrice had drained her secret savings to bail Kyle out of jail, so there was no money for groceries. The fridge, which was usually stocked with organic produce and imported cheeses, was now empty except for a few condiments and a carton of spoiled milk. I can imagine the scene in the kitchen. Tiffany was probably standing by the open refrigerator door, staring into the void. She turned to Beatrice, who was sitting at the table nursing a cup of tea because the coffee was gone. So this is the plan, Tiffany sneered. We just starved to death in a mansion while waiting for the police to kick us out. Beatrice looked up. Her eyes were rimmed with red. She looked 10 years older than she had 3 days ago. "Stop it, Tiffany. I am thinking." "You are not thinking," Tiffany snapped. "You are praying." "There is a difference. You are praying that Isaiah is going to magically walk through that door and save us. But he is not coming, Beatrice. He is gone, and we are broke." Kyle walked in. He looked rough. Jail hadn't been kind to him. He was wearing the same clothes he had been arrested in. He went to the pantry and rummaged around. "There is nothing to eat," he whined. "Ma, I am hungry. Can't we order a pizza?" "With what money?" Kyle Beatrice shouted, slamming her teacup down. "I spent my last $5,000 getting you out of that cell. Tiffany won't give us a dime. We have nothing." "Don't look at me," Tiffany said, crossing her arms. "I am not throwing good money after bad. Besides, I need my cash for a hotel room when Henderson comes back with the locksmith." "You are selfish," Beatrice spat. "You lived here rent-free for 2 years. You ate my food, you drank my wine, and now when we are in a crisis you hoard your money like a dragon, and you are a failure," Tiffany shot back. "You had one job, Beatrice. Keep the old man happy. Keep the checkbook open. But you had to go and throw a temper tantrum. You threw coffee on the golden goose, and now we are all cooking in the pot." The air in the kitchen was thick enough to choke on. They were tearing each other apart. The mother, the son, and the daughter-in-law. The unholy trinity of greed was collapsing under the weight of its own incompetence. That was the moment I chose to strike. I didn't send police. I didn't send lawyers. I sent a delivery boy. The doorbell rang. The sound made them all jump. Kyle looked terrified, thinking it was the cops coming back for him. Tiffany looked wary, thinking it was Henderson. Beatrice walked to the door. She smoothed her robe. She took a deep breath. She opened it just a crack, ready to fight or beg. But it wasn't a suit. It was a kid in a baseball cap holding a bouquet of flowers so big he could barely see over the top of it. 4 dozen long-stemmed red roses. Imported. Expensive. "The kind I used to buy her on our anniversary." "Delivery for Mrs. Freeman," the kid said. Beatrice's mouth fell open. She took the flowers. They were heavy. She carried them into the kitchen and set them on the island. The smell of fresh roses filled the room, masking the scent of stale fear. "Who are they from?" Tiffany asked, eyeing the bouquet with suspicion. Beatrice pulled the small white envelope from the plastic fork stuck in the greenery. Her hands were trembling. She opened it. She pulled out the card. "I wrote that card myself, sitting at the desk in the bunker. I spent an hour crafting the perfect lie. I needed to sound weak. I needed to sound like the man she thought I was. The man she despised but needed." She read it out loud. Her voice gained strength with every word. "My dearest Beatrice, I am sorry. I have had a lot of time to think in the hospital. I realize I overreacted. You were just stressed about Kyle, and I should have been more understanding. I don't want to fight anymore. I miss my home. I miss my wife. Please forgive an old foolish man. I am checking out this afternoon. I will be home for dinner. Let's start over. Love, Isaiah." Beatrice dropped the card on the table. She looked at Tiffany. She looked at Kyle, and then she smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It was the smile of a predator who thought the trap had snapped shut only to find the prey had walked right back into its mouth. "I told you," she whispered. "I told you he would come back." She laughed. A manic, triumphant laugh. She grabbed the card and waved it in Tiffany's face. "You called me stupid," she gloated. "You said I blew it. But look at this. He is apologizing to me. He is begging for my forgiveness. I won. I broke him." Tiffany read the card. She looked confused. It didn't make sense to her, but the flowers were real. The handwriting was mine. The desperation in the note fit the profile of the man they thought I was. "He is coming home tonight," Beatrice announced, clapping her hands. "Oh my God, we have so much to do. The house is a mess." She spun around, barking orders like a general on a battlefield. "Kyle, take a shower and shave. You look like a convict. Put on a suit. We need to look respectable. We need to look like a loving family. Tiffany, help me clean the living room, hide the boxes, put the broken statue in the garage. We need to make it look like nothing changed." "But what about dinner?" Kyle asked. "We have no food." Beatrice ran to her purse. She dug around in the bottom lining. She found a crumpled $20 bill and a handful of quarters. "Go to the grocery store," she ordered. "Buy a roast. Buy potatoes. Buy a bottle of wine. Cheap wine, he won't know the difference tonight. We are going to make him a pot roast, his favorite. We are going to kill the fatted calf for the prodigal father." For the next 6 hours, the house was a beehive of activity. They scrubbed the floors. They vacuumed the rugs. They hid the evidence of their looting. Beatrice was humming. She was in her element. She convinced herself that she had won the war. She convinced herself that I was coming back to apologize, to hand her the credit cards, to restore her kingdom. She didn't know she was cleaning the house for her own funeral. I sat in the bunker watching the security feed. I saw them running around. I saw Beatrice putting on her makeup, covering the dark circles under her eyes. I saw her put on the dress I bought her in Milan. She was setting the stage for a play that had already been canceled. She cooked the roast. The smell of beef and onions wafted through the house. It was a smell that used to mean home to me. Now it just smelled like deception. At 6 o'clock, everything was ready. The table was set with the good china. The candles were lit. The wine was breathing. Beatrice stood by the window watching the driveway. Kyle sat on the sofa in his suit, looking uncomfortable. Tiffany sat in the armchair tapping her foot. "He will be here any minute," Beatrice said, checking her watch. "He is probably just stuck in traffic." 6:30 came. No car. 7 o'clock. The roast was getting dry. Maybe he stopped to get a gift, Tiffany suggested. If he is in an apologizing mood, maybe he went to the jewelry store. Beatrice nodded eagerly. "Yes, that must be it. He always buys me jewelry when he feels guilty." 7:30. Beatrice's smile was starting to crack. She paced back and forth. "Where is he?" she muttered. "He said he would be home for dinner." Then headlights swept across the front window. "He is here!" Beatrice shrieked. Everyone place's smile look happy. She ran to the door. She threw it open wide, ready to welcome me back into her web, ready to accept my apology and take my wallet. But it wasn't my car in the driveway. It was a generic sedan. A man walked up the path. He wasn't me. He was short, balding, and wearing a cheap windbreaker. Beatrice's smile faltered. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice tight. "Are you Beatrice Freeman?" the man asked. "Yes," she said. He reached into his jacket. He didn't pull out jewelry. He didn't pull out a peace offering. He pulled out a thick envelope. "You have been served, ma'am," he said. He thrust the papers into her hand and turned around, walking back to his car without another word. Beatrice stood in the doorway holding the envelope. The cold night air blew into the warm house, flickering the candles on the dining table. She looked down. The words at the top of the document were bold and black. Petition for dissolution of marriage, and underneath that in smaller print, emergency motion for exclusive possession of the marital residence, and underneath that, restraining order. Beatrice didn't move. She couldn't move. The reality of the situation hit her like a physical blow. There was no apology coming. There was no reconciliation. The flowers were a lie. The note was a lie. I had gaslighted her. I had used her own vanity against her. I had made her spend her last few dollars on a dinner I was never going to eat. I had made her clean a house she was about to be kicked out of. I had given her 6 hours of hope just so I could watch it shatter. Tiffany walked up behind her. She looked over Beatrice's shoulder. She read the papers. "He is not coming, is he?" Tiffany said quietly. Beatrice dropped the papers. She let out a scream that started low in her throat and rose to a shriek of pure, unadulterated rage. She turned and ran into the kitchen. She grabbed the vase of red roses, the symbol of my fake love. She threw it against the wall. Glass shattered everywhere. Water splashed onto the floor. The red roses lay amidst the debris like drops of blood. "He played me," she screamed, tearing at her hair. "He played me." Kyle ran in. "Ma, what happened?" "Where is Dad?" "He is gone," Beatrice wailed, sinking to the floor amidst the broken glass and dying flowers. "He is gone and he is divorcing me. He lied. He made me cook dinner. He made me clean." She grabbed a handful of the roast beef from the platter and threw it across the room. It splattered against the newly cleaned window. I watched it all on the monitor. I took a sip of my water. It was cool and refreshing. There is a saying that revenge is a dish best served cold, but I disagree. Sometimes revenge is a pot roast served hot to an empty chair while your enemy realizes they are completely and utterly alone. I picked up my phone. I sent a text to Marcus. "Served," I wrote. "Delivered," he replied. I looked at Beatrice sobbing on the floor. The queen of the castle was dethroned. The gaslighting was complete. She questioned her reality. She questioned her sanity. And now she knew the truth. She wasn't the player. She was the pawn. And the game was almost over. The conference room in the downtown law office was cold. It was one of those rooms designed to intimidate, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gray Chicago skyline, and a table made of glass that looked fragile but was hard as stone. I sat at one end. Marcus sat next to me. On the other side sat Beatrice, her cheap lawyer, and Tiffany. Kyle wasn't there. He was too ashamed or maybe too scared to face me after the arrest. The air conditioner was humming, but Beatrice was sweating. She was wearing a black dress, trying to look like a mourning widow even though her husband was sitting right across from her. She refused to look at the bandage on the left side of my face. She refused to acknowledge the burn she put there. Instead, she stared at the papers in front of her, grasping a pen like it was a dagger. Her lawyer cleared his throat. He was a nervous man with a cheap suit and a comb-over. He looked out of place next to Marcus, who looked like he owned the building. "We are here to discuss the terms of the separation," the lawyer stammered. "Mrs. Freeman is requesting an equitable distribution of marital assets. Given the duration of the marriage and her contribution to the household, she is entitled to 50% of the estate." I didn't say a word. I just tapped my finger on the glass table. 1, 2, 3, 50%. Marcus repeated, his voice flat. "You want $10 million. Beatrice finally looked up. Her eyes were hard. "I deserve it," she snapped. "I gave him 5 years of my life. I took care of him. I managed his house. I nursed him when he had the flu. I was a good wife, and he abandoned me. He locked me out of my own home without a penny. I have suffered emotional distress. 10 million is a bargain for what he put me through." I looked at this woman who threw boiling coffee at my face 3 days ago because I wouldn't fund a scam. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive how she had rewritten history in her own mind to make herself the hero. Marcus leaned forward. He opened a thick file folder. "Let us talk about your contribution, Mrs. Freeman," Marcus said. He pulled out a medical report. He slid it across the table. It spun on the glass and stopped right in front of Beatrice. "This is the report from Dr. Evans," Marcus said. "Second-degree burns, facial trauma, risk of infection, caused by a domestic assault committed by you in the kitchen of the marital residence." Beatrice flinched. "That was an accident," she hissed. "I told you." I tripped. The pot flew out of my hand. Marcus didn't blink. "We have the forensic analysis of the splash pattern. It wasn't a spill, Mrs. Freeman. It was a throw. But let us put the violence aside for a moment. Let us talk about the money. You claim you were a devoted wife. You claim you managed the household finances with integrity." He pulled out another document. This one was a bank statement. But it wasn't from our joint account. It was from a private account under her maiden name, an account she thought I didn't know about. Beatrice's face went pale. The makeup couldn't hide the fear rising in her cheeks. "Over the last 3 years, you have siphoned approximately $200,000 from the household budget," Marcus recited. "You disguised them as grocery bills, contractor fees, and charitable donations." "That is my savings," Beatrice stuttered. "A wife is allowed to have pin money." "Pin money?" Marcus asked, raising an eyebrow. 200 grand is a lot of pins. But the interesting part is not that you took it, it is where you sent it." He laid down a stack of canceled checks. "Who is Raymond Carter, Mrs. Freeman?" The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Tiffany, who had been sitting quietly in the corner looking bored, suddenly sat up straight. She looked at Beatrice with wide eyes. Beatrice looked like she was going to be sick. She tried to grab the checks, but Marcus put his hand over them. "Raymond Carter is your ex-boyfriend from 30 years ago," Marcus continued. "He was released from prison in 2021. Since then, you have been sending him monthly stipends. You bought him a truck. You paid his rent. You used Isaiah Freeman's hard-earned money to support the man you were sleeping with before you met him." I looked at Beatrice. That was the dagger. The money didn't hurt me. The betrayal did. She looked at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "He was in trouble," she whispered, tears leaking from her eyes. "He had nobody. I was just helping an old friend." "You were investing in your backup plan," I said. My voice was rough gravel in a mixer. "You were waiting for me to die so you could go back to him with my millions." "But I didn't die fast enough, did I, Beatrice?" Beatrice put her head in her hands. Her lawyer looked at the evidence and closed his notebook. He knew the case was dead. Adultery, theft, assault. There was no judge in Illinois who would give her a dime. But Tiffany wasn't looking at the lawyer. She was looking at the sinking ship. Tiffany is a survivor. She realized in that moment that Beatrice was radioactive. If she stayed on Beatrice's side, she would go down with her. She would be liable for the debts. She would be homeless. She needed a lifeboat, and she decided that the only way to save herself was to drown Beatrice. Tiffany stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "It is not just the money," she said loudly. Beatrice looked up. "Tiffany, what are you doing?" Tiffany pointed a manicured finger at her mother-in-law. Her face was twisted with fake outrage. "She made us do it," Tiffany shouted, looking directly at me. "Isaiah, listen to me. Kyle didn't want to ask you for the money. I didn't want to ask. She forced us." Beatrice stood up, knocking her chair over. "You liar. She is the one who planned it," Tiffany continued, her voice rising to a screech. "She told Kyle that you were getting senile. She told us that you didn't check the accounts. She said we should take what we can before you kicked the bucket. The crypto scam. That was her idea. She pushed Kyle to ask for the credit card. She said if you refused, she would make your life a living hell until you gave in." Tiffany turned to me, tears streaming down her face. Crocodile tears. "I told her to stop, Isaiah. I told her it was wrong, but she threatened us. She said if we didn't help her get the money, she would kick us out. We were hostages. Kyle is innocent. He just does what his mother tells him. Please don't punish him for her greed." Beatrice let out a sound that wasn't human. It was the howl of a wounded animal. She had lost her husband. She had lost her lover. She had lost her money. And now the woman she had conspired with, the woman she had welcomed into her home, was stabbing her in the back to save her own skin. "You ungrateful little witch," Beatrice screamed. She lunged. It happened in slow motion. Beatrice threw herself across the glass table. She didn't go for me. She went for Tiffany. Her hand connected with Tiffany's cheek. A sharp, cracking slap that echoed off the walls. Tiffany stumbled back, holding her face. "You crazy old hag," she yelled. Beatrice tried to grab Tiffany's hair. "I paid for that hair," Beatrice shrieked. "I paid for that dress. I paid for everything. You are nothing without me." The lawyers jumped up. Beatrice's lawyer tried to grab her arms. Marcus stood in front of me, blocking the chaos. Not that I needed protection from these two. "Order," the lawyer shouted. "Beatrice, stop." Beatrice was thrashing, kicking, screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush. The mask of the refined society wife was gone. The victim act was gone. This was the real Beatrice. Violent, vicious, and completely out of control. "Get off me," she screamed at her lawyer. Tiffany was cowering in the corner, still pointing at Beatrice, still playing the victim. "See?" she cried, looking at me. "See how crazy she is. She attacked you, and now she attacks me. She is dangerous." "Isaiah." I stood up. The movement was small, but it commanded the room. Beatrice stopped struggling. She looked at me. Her hair was messy, her dress was twisted, and her eyes were wild. I looked at her. Then I looked at Tiffany. "Two rats in a bucket," I said quietly. "Eating each other because there is no food left." Beatrice panted, her chest heaving. "Isaiah, she is lying. Don't listen to her." "And you are a thief," I said. "You stole from me to feed a convict. You threw boiling water on my face, and now you are brawling in a law office like a street thug." I turned to Marcus. "We are done here. No settlement, no negotiation. We go to trial. I want the judge to see the police report, I want the judge to see the bank statements, and I want the judge to hear about this little performance." "But Isaiah," Beatrice pleaded, reaching out a hand. "Don't touch me," I said. I looked at Tiffany. She wiped her fake tears, thinking she had won, thinking she had bought herself some mercy. "And you," I said, "you think betraying her saves you. You are just as guilty. You knew about the theft. You participated in the fraud. And now you turn on your partner the moment things get hot." I buttoned my jacket. "I don't make deals with traitors, Tiffany." I walked to the door. Beatrice sank to the floor, sobbing into the carpet. Tiffany stood frozen, her face red from the slap and pale from the realization that her gamble had failed. Marcus gathered the files. He looked at Beatrice's lawyer, who was wiping sweat from his forehead. "We will see you in court," Marcus said. "And bring a better suit. You are going to need it." We walked out into the hallway. The door closed behind us, muffling the sound of Beatrice's weeping. I walked to the elevator. My face throbbed, but the pain was different now. It wasn't the pain of betrayal anymore. It was the pain of a wound that was finally starting to heal. "Did you see her face?" Marcus asked, pressing the button for the lobby. "I saw it," I said. She has nothing left, Marcus said. No, I corrected. She has the truth. For the first time in 5 years, she has the truth. She is alone, she is broke. And the people she trusted are just as rotten as she is. The elevator doors opened. We stepped inside. The alliance was broken. The enemy was scattered. Now it was time for the final blow. It was time to take back the one thing they thought they could keep, the house. The drive back from the law office was the longest 40 minutes of their lives. I wasn't in the car with them, but I can imagine the atmosphere. It was a taxi because the Mercedes was in the impound lot and I had taken the spare keys to the other cars. Beatrice and Tiffany sat in the back seat, separated by a foot of vinyl and a mile of hatred. They were exhausted. The adrenaline from the brawl in the conference room had faded, leaving only the dull ache of a reality they were still refusing to accept. They thought the day couldn't get any worse. They thought the humiliation of the slap and the exposure of Beatrice's affair was rock bottom. They were wrong. Rock bottom has a basement, and they were about to find the trapdoor. Beatrice was probably rehearsing her speech. She is a woman who believes that if she talks loud enough, she can bend the world to her will. She was probably telling herself that once she got back to the house, she would call the police. She would call the media. She would chain herself to the front porch if she had to. She still believed it was her house. She still believed that possession was 9/10 of the law. She forgot that the other 1/10 belongs to the man who signs the checks. It was raining when the taxi pulled onto Lakeshore Drive. A cold, gray Chicago drizzle that soaks into your bones. The kind of rain that washes away the shine of the city and leaves everything looking gritty and real. The taxi slowed down as it approached number 124. That is when they saw it. It wasn't the warm yellow glow of the porch lights welcoming them home. It wasn't the security of the heavy oak doors. It was a pile. A massive, sodden, chaotic pile of cardboard boxes stacked haphazardly on the curb. They were sitting right on the edge of the street where the garbage trucks stop. The cardboard was already softening in the rain, turning into a dark mush. Clothes were spilling out of a burst seam. A shoe was lying in a puddle. A lampshade was crushed against a fire hydrant. "What is that?" Beatrice asked, leaning forward against the glass. The taxi driver squinted. "Looks like someone got evicted," he muttered. Beatrice's heart must have stopped. She recognized the lampshade. It was the cheap one from IKEA she bought for Kyle's room when he first moved in. She recognized the pattern on the fabric spilling out of the box. It was her old winter coat, the one she bought before she met me. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." She threw the door open before the taxi even came to a full stop. She didn't pay the driver. She didn't wait for Tiffany. She ran across the wet grass, her heels sinking into the mud, ruining her shoes. She ran to the front door. She grabbed the handle. She twisted it. Locked. She shoved her key into the lock. It didn't go in. She shoved it harder, scraping the metal. It wouldn't fit. The lock was new. It was a heavy-duty industrial deadlock, the kind we use on shipping containers at the rail yard. It was a lock, designed to keep out thieves and scavengers. "Open the door," Beatrice screamed, pounding on the wood with her fists. "Open this door right now. This is my house." There was no answer. The house was dark. The curtains were drawn. It stood there like a fortress, impenetrable and silent. Tiffany walked up the driveway slowly. She wasn't running. She was looking at the boxes. She kicked one over. It was full of her things, her cheap makeup, her old paperbacks, the clothes she bought with her own money before she started using my credit cards. "Where's the rest of it?" Tiffany asked, her voice hollow. "Where are the furs? Where's the jewelry? Where are the designer bags?" They weren't there. Mr. Henderson is a precise man. When he executed the eviction order an hour after we left the law office, he followed the letter of the law. The trust allows for the removal of personal property belonging to the tenant. But any property purchased with funds from the trust or its beneficiaries remains the property of the trust until a forensic audit is complete. That meant they got to keep what they came with. Beatrice came into my life with debt and a suitcase of old clothes, and that is exactly what she was leaving with. Beatrice turned away from the door, panting. Her hair was plastered to her face by the rain. She looked at the pile of wet boxes. She looked at the dark house. "He can't do this," she wailed. She looked like a ghost haunting her own grave. "He can't just lock me out." A man stepped out from the side of the garage. He was wearing a black raincoat and holding a clipboard. He was big. He looked like an ex-linebacker. He was part of the private security team Henderson had hired. "Mrs. Freeman?" he said, his voice cutting through the sound of the rain. Beatrice jumped. "Who are you?" "Open this door." "I am afraid I can't do that, ma'am," the guard said. "The locks have been changed pursuant to the emergency order executed by Freeman Holdings. You are currently trespassing on private property." "Trespassing," Beatrice shrieked. "I live here." "Not anymore, ma'am. The lease has been terminated under Clause 19B. Your personal effects have been removed and placed on the curb in accordance with city ordinances regarding eviction. You have 20 minutes to collect your items and vacate the perimeter before I call the police." Beatrice charged at him. She actually charged at a 6'4" security guard. She swiped at him with her nails. "Get out of my way," she screamed. The guard didn't even flinch. He just stepped back and put a hand on his radio. "Dispatch. We have a hostile subject at the gate. Send a patrol car." Tiffany grabbed Beatrice's arm and pulled her back. "Stop it, you idiot. Do you want to go to jail too? Kyle is already a felon. Do you want to make it a family reunion?" Beatrice collapsed onto the wet pavement. She sat there in the rain, surrounded by the wreckage of her life. She looked at the house she had tried to steal, the house she had thrown coffee to protect. It was gone. It was just a building now, a building she couldn't enter. And then the neighbors came out. Lakeshore Drive is a quiet neighborhood, but people here are nosy. They had seen the moving trucks, they had seen the security team, and now they heard the screaming. Mrs. Higgins from next door was standing on her porch. Beatrice hated Mrs. Higgins. She used to make fun of her garden gnomes. She used to complain about Mrs. Higgins's dog. Now Mrs. Higgins was holding her phone up. The little red light was blinking. She was recording. Across the street, the gardener for the Johnson family stopped his leaf blower to watch. A jogger slowed down and pulled out his phone. Beatrice looked around. She saw the lenses pointed at her. She saw the judgment. "Stop looking at me!" she screamed at Mrs. Higgins. "Go inside!" Mind your own business. But it was their business now. The great Beatrice Freeman, the social climber, the woman who hosted charity galas and looked down her nose at everyone, was sitting in a puddle fighting with a security guard over a box of wet clothes. It was a spectacle. It was a tragedy. It was a circus. And then the final act arrived. A car turned the corner. It moved slowly, silent as a shark. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, deep blue, almost black. The neighbors knew that car. Beatrice knew that car. It glided up to the curb and stopped right in front of the pile of boxes. The security guard straightened up and nodded respectfully. Beatrice scrambled to her feet. She wiped the mud from her face. She smoothed her ruined dress. Hope is a terrible thing. Even after everything, she still thought she could talk her way out of it. She thought I had come to save her. She thought I had come to call off the guard and let her back in. "Isaiah," she cried, running toward the car. "Isaiah, please." She reached the car. She put her hands on the passenger window. "Isaiah, look at what they did to me. Look at your wife. Open the door, baby, please. I am sorry. I will do anything. Just let me in. It is cold." The window was tinted dark. She couldn't see inside. She was just talking to her own reflection. Then the window began to lower, slowly, smoothly. Beatrice gasped. She leaned in. "Isaiah." The window went down all the way. I was sitting in the back seat. I was wearing a fresh suit. My bandage was clean. I was dry. I was warm. I was holding a glass of sparkling water. I didn't say a word. I just turned my head and looked at her. I looked at the woman who had promised to love me in sickness and in health. I looked at the woman who had siphoned my money to her lover. I looked at the woman who had raised a thief and married a snake. She looked pathetic. She looked small. Isaiah, Beatrice sobbed, reaching her hand through the window. "Please, I have nowhere to go." I didn't take her hand. I didn't yell. I didn't lecture her. I just looked at her with absolute indifference. It wasn't hate. Hate implies that I still cared. It was the way you look at a stranger on the street. It was the way you look at a mistake you made a long time ago. I pressed the button on the armrest. The window began to rise. "No," Beatrice screamed. "No, Isaiah, don't do this." She tried to hold the glass, but the motor was strong. She had to pull her hands back or lose her fingers. The window closed with a soft thud, sealing me back inside my world of warmth and silence. I tapped the partition. "Drive," I said to the chauffeur. The Rolls-Royce pulled away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to look back. I knew what was happening behind me. Beatrice was chasing the car. She was running in her bare feet because she had lost her shoes in the mud. She was screaming my name until her voice broke. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs gave out. She collapsed in the middle of the street. The rain mixed with her tears. Tiffany didn't run. She stood on the curb kicking a wet box of paperbacks. She watched the car disappear around the corner. She knew it was over. She knew there was no mercy coming. The security guard walked over to Beatrice. "Ma'am," he said, not unkindly. "You have 5 minutes. The police are 2 blocks away." Beatrice looked up at the sky. She looked at the house that was no longer hers. She looked at the neighbors who were now posting the videos to Facebook. She had wanted half. She had wanted $10 million. She had wanted it all. Now she had a box of wet clothes and a bill for a taxi she couldn't pay. They were officially homeless. And as the Rolls-Royce merged onto the highway carrying me toward my new life, I took a sip of water. It tasted clean. It tasted like freedom. The house was gone. The wife was gone. The parasite son was gone. I was alone. But for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't lonely. Loyalty is a currency that depreciates faster than a new car the moment the engine stops running. I watched from the back seat of my Rolls-Royce as my wife chased the car down the street, but I didn't need to see what happened next to know the truth. I knew Tiffany. I knew that girl had a calculator where her heart was supposed to be. She had done the math standing on that wet curb, and the equation was simple. Kyle plus Beatrice equaled 0, and Tiffany does not invest in 0. The moment my taillights disappeared around the corner, the alliance dissolved. Beatrice was sitting in the middle of the road, weeping into the asphalt, ruining her dress and her dignity. Kyle was trying to help her up, pulling at her arm with the weak desperation of a man who needs his mommy to fix everything. And Tiffany stood there holding her 1 box of personal items, watching them with the cold detachment of a coroner looking at a corpse. She didn't offer to help Beatrice up. She didn't offer a tissue. She pulled out her phone and called an Uber. Kyle looked at her confused. "Tiff, where are you going? We need to find a hotel. We need to stick together." Tiffany laughed. It was a harsh sound that cut through the rain. "Stick together. You are drowning, Kyle. If I stick to you, I drown too. I am going to my parents' house. But we are married," Kyle stammered. "Not for long," Tiffany said. She didn't even look at him. She looked at the screen of her phone, tracking the driver. "You are a felon, Kyle. You are broke. You are homeless. And frankly, you are pathetic. I married a man with potential, not a man who has to steal his daddy's watch to feel important." The Uber pulled up, a generic silver sedan. Tiffany opened the door and threw her box in the back. "Wait!" Beatrice screamed, running up to the car, mud streaked across her face. "Tiffany, you can't leave us. You have money. You have savings. We need a room for the night." Tiffany slammed the car door shut. She rolled down the window just an inch. "Ask your son for money," she said. "Oh, wait. He spent it all on legal fees." The car drove away, splashing dirty water onto Beatrice's legs. She stood there watching the last rat flee the ship. She looked at Kyle. For the first time in his life, Kyle looked at his mother and saw fear. He saw that she didn't have a plan. The queen was naked, and the castle was gone. They walked for 6 blocks in the rain, carrying their soggy boxes. They couldn't afford a taxi. They found a motel on the edge of the district. The kind of place that charges by the hour and smells like stale smoke and regret. The neon sign was broken, buzzing loudly in the damp air. The Starlight Motel. There was no starlight here, only the flickering fluorescent lights of the parking lot. Beatrice used a crumpled credit card she found in her purse, one with a $500 limit to pay for a room. Room 104. It was on the ground floor next to the ice machine. I wasn't there, but I can picture it perfectly. The carpet was sticky. The bedspread had cigarette burns. The walls were thin enough to hear the couple arguing in the next room. Beatrice sat on the edge of the sagging mattress and stared at the water stain on the ceiling. She didn't cry anymore. She was in shock. She was trying to process how she had gone from a 5,000-square-foot mansion on Lakeshore Drive to a room that smelled of bleach and despair in less than 4 hours. Kyle sat on the floor, eating a bag of vending machine chips. He was pacing back and forth, muttering to himself. He was angry at me. He was angry at Tiffany. He was angry at the world. He still didn't understand that he was the architect of his own misery. They spent the first night in silence, but the morning brought a new kind of hell. At 9 o'clock there was a knock on the door. It wasn't housekeeping. Kyle opened it thinking maybe Tiffany had come back. Maybe she had a change of heart. Two men stood in the doorway. They were large. They wore cheap suits that strained at the shoulders. They looked like linebackers trying to sell Bibles, but their eyes were dead. These were not the kind of men you invited in for coffee. These were the collection agents for North Star Collections, my company, or rather the shell company I had set up to buy bad debts. Kyle Freeman, one of them asked. His voice was like grinding stones. Yeah, Kyle said, stepping back. Who are you? The man stepped into the room, forcing Kyle to retreat. His partner followed, closing the door behind them. The room suddenly felt very small. We represent North Star Collections, the man said. We have acquired the debt obligations previously held by Silas Vane and the Crypto Harvest Group. Kyle's face went white. He knew Silas Vane. He knew the kind of people Silas associated with. But he didn't know North Star. He didn't know that the man pulling the strings was the stepfather he had betrayed. I don't have the money right now, Kyle stammered, backing into the dresser. The market crashed. I told Silas I needed more time. The second man pulled a document from his jacket. It wasn't a baseball bat. It was a legal summons. Silas sold the paper, the man said. We don't do extensions. You owe a principal of $100,000 plus interest and penalties. The total outstanding balance is $212,000. Beatrice stood up from the bed. She tried to summon some of her old arrogance. Who do you think you are bursting into our room? Get out before I call the police. The first man laughed. Call them lady, please. We would love for the police to come. He looked at Kyle. You see, Mr. Freeman, this isn't just a loan. You signed a promissory note using collateral you didn't own. You listed the house on Lakeshore Drive as an asset. That is fraud. That is obtaining funds under false pretenses. That is a federal crime. Kyle started to shake. Fraud. No, it was just a mistake on the application. The man stepped closer. In the state of Illinois, fraud over $100,000 carries a mandatory prison sentence of 4 to 15 years. We are prepared to file the police report today. Unless what? Beatrice whispered, clutching her chest. Unless you pay the balance in full. Today. Kyle sank to the floor. $200,000, I don't have it. You know I don't have it. I have $50 in my pocket. Then enjoy prison, the man said. He dropped the summons on Kyle's lap. We will give you until 5 p.m. If the funds are not wired to this account number, we go to the district attorney. And given your recent arrest for grand theft auto, I don't think the judge is going to be very lenient. They turned and walked out, closing the door softly. The silence in the room was heavy. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hovering at the top of the track. Kyle began to hyperventilate. Ma, he gasped, grabbing Beatrice's leg. Ma, you have to do something. They are going to send me to prison. 15 years, Ma, I can't survive prison. I am not built for that. Beatrice looked at her son. She looked at the pathetic man-child huddled on the dirty carpet of a cheap motel. She saw the terror in his eyes, and she knew he was right. Kyle wouldn't last a week in prison. He was soft. He was weak. She had to save him. It was her instinct. It was her curse. She reached for her phone. Her hands were trembling so badly she dropped it twice. She knew there was only one person in the world who had $200,000 and a reason to answer her call. She dialed my number. I was sitting in a private booth at the Green Mill, my favorite jazz club in Uptown. It was early afternoon and the place was empty except for the bartender polishing glasses and a pianist playing a soft, melancholy tune. I had a glass of bourbon in front of me. I watched the phone ring. I let it ring until the last possible second. Then I picked up. Hello, Beatrice. My voice was calm. It was the voice of a man who is exactly where he wants to be. Isaiah? Beatrice sobbed. Her voice was broken, shrill with panic. Isaiah, please don't hang up. Please. I took a sip of bourbon. I am here, Beatrice. What do you want? We are at the Starlight Motel, she cried. It is awful, Isaiah. There are cockroaches. Kyle is sick. And these men came. North Star Collections. I asked. She froze. How did you know their name? I make it my business to know things, Beatrice. What did they want? They want money, she screamed. They say Kyle owes them $200,000 from that crypto thing. They say they are going to put him in prison for fraud. Isaiah, you have to help us, please. It is prison. They are going to lock him up. I swirled the ice in my glass. Kyle made some bad investments, Beatrice. That is how the world works. You gamble, you lose. But not prison, she begged. He is just a boy. He didn't mean to hurt anyone. Isaiah, you have the money. You have millions. 200,000 is nothing to you. It is pocket change. Please just write the check. Save him. Why should I, Beatrice? Because we are family, she wailed. The word echoed in the empty club. Family. It was a word she had used as a weapon for 5 years. She used it to manipulate, to control, to take. He is your stepson, she continued, desperate now, pleading. Remember our wedding day, Isaiah. Remember your vows. You promised to love me. You promised to take care of us. You looked at Kyle and you promised to love him like a son. You gave your word. Isaiah, you are a man of your word. I listened to her. I listened to the desperation of a mother who had created a monster and was now terrified of the consequences. I set my glass down on the table. The sound was sharp against the wood. You are right, Beatrice, I said slowly. I did make a promise. Yes, you did. So please help him. I promised to love him like a son, I repeated. But Beatrice, there is a difference between a son and what Kyle is. What do you mean, she whispered. A son makes mistakes and learns from them. I said, my voice dropping to a low rumble. A son respects his father's house. A son works hard. Kyle doesn't do any of that. Kyle steals watches. Kyle steals cars. Kyle scams people. He is sick, Beatrice cried. He needs help. No, Beatrice, he isn't sick. He is hungry. I paused, letting the words hang in the air between us. I promised to treat him like a human being, I said. And I did. I gave him a home. I gave him a car. I gave him an education. But he didn't want to live like a human. He wanted to live like a parasite. Isaiah, and I don't feed parasites, Beatrice. But he will go to jail, she screamed. Then maybe jail will teach him what I couldn't, I said. Maybe a cage will teach him the value of freedom. Because clearly a mansion only taught him entitlement. I am begging you, Beatrice shrieked. I will do anything. I will sign any paper. I will disappear. Just pay the debt. The debt is already paid, Beatrice, I said. She stopped crying. What? What do you mean? I mean, I bought the debt, I said. North Star Collections is me, Beatrice. I own the paper. I own the fraud charges. There was a silence on the other end of the line so profound it felt like the earth had stopped spinning. You, she whispered. You sent them. I sent them to collect what is mine, I said. You monster, she hissed. You are a monster. No, Beatrice. I am just a businessman, and I am closing a bad account. I hung up the phone. I signaled the bartender for another drink. The pianist shifted into a blues riff. It was sad and low and beautiful. I thought about Kyle sitting in that motel room waiting for a savior who was actually his executioner. I thought about Beatrice realizing that the man she had thrown away was the only thing standing between her son and a concrete cell. I didn't feel happy. You don't feel happy when you put a rabid dog down. You just feel relief that it won't bite anyone else. I checked my watch. It was 2 p.m. They had 3 hours left. I wondered if Tiffany was enjoying her stay at her parents' house. I wondered if she knew that her husband was about to become a ward of the state. Probably. And she probably didn't care. I leaned back and closed my eyes, letting the jazz wash over me. Parasites need a host to survive. Without me, they were just dying organisms in a cheap motel room. And I was finally free. Tiffany Reynolds thought she was the smartest person in the room. She thought she was the grandmaster of chess while the rest of us were playing checkers. When the ship started sinking on Lakeshore Drive, she didn't grab a bucket to bail out the water. She grabbed a life vest and jumped overboard, leaving her husband and her mother-in-law to drown in the freezing waters of reality. She ran back to the safety of her parents' house in the suburbs. It was a nice house with a manicured lawn and a white picket fence, the kind of place where people worry about crabgrass and homeowners association fees. She told her parents a sob story. She told them that Kyle had relapsed into gambling. She told them that Beatrice had gone insane. She painted herself as the victim, the poor innocent girl who had tried to save the Freeman family from themselves only to be betrayed. Her parents believed her. They poured her a glass of expensive Chardonnay and patted her hand and told her she was better off without those people. Tiffany sat in her old bedroom surrounded by her high school trophies and thought she had escaped. She thought the war was over. She thought she could just wash her hands of the dirt and walk back into her shiny life as a top-tier real estate agent. She forgot one thing. She forgot that I don't leave loose ends. I wasn't just coming for the people who threw the coffee. I was coming for the person who whispered in their ear to pick up the pot. The next morning, Tiffany put on her best power suit. She did her hair. She put on her makeup, masking the stress of the last few days. She drove her father's car to the downtown office of Prestige Estates, the luxury brokerage where she worked. She walked in with her head held high, ready to sell million-dollar condos to tech billionaires. She thought her biggest problem was explaining why she was living at home again. She didn't know that an hour before she arrived, a courier had delivered a thick red envelope to the desk of Mr. Sterling, the senior partner. Inside that envelope was a dossier compiled by Marcus. It contained the foreclosure notice on her own apartment. It contained the police report of the disturbance at my house. But most damning of all, it contained the debt transfer documents from North Star Collections. It showed that Tiffany Reynolds, a licensed fiduciary agent entrusted with millions of dollars of client money, was deeply involved in a Ponzi scheme. It showed she was insolvent. It showed she had solicited funds for a fraudulent enterprise. In the world of high-end real estate, reputation is oxygen, and I had just cut off her air supply. Tiffany walked to her desk. She smiled at the receptionist. She opened her laptop, then Mr. Sterling came out of his office. He didn't smile. He didn't say good morning. He was accompanied by 2 security guards. "Tiffany Reynolds," he said. His voice carried across the silent bullpens. "Please step away from the computer." Tiffany froze. "Mr. Sterling, what is going on?" "You are terminated, effective immediately," he said. "We have received credible evidence regarding your financial activities. Prestige Estates cannot be associated with individuals under investigation for fraud." "Fraud?" Tiffany gasped, standing up. Her face went pale. "That is a lie." "Who told you that?" "We have the documents," Tiffany Sterling said. He threw a copy of the crypto harvest file on her desk. "The Ponzi scheme, the debt. It is all here. You are a liability." Everyone was looking. The other agents, the assistants, the clients in the waiting area. They were all watching the golden girl turn into rust. "But I am a victim," Tiffany stammered, trying to play the card that had always worked for her. "I lost money too." "That makes you incompetent," Sterling said, cold as ice. "And the fact that you tried to recruit others makes you complicit. Pack your things. You have 5 minutes." The security guard stepped forward, holding a cardboard box. It was the same scene as the eviction on Lakeshore Drive, but this time it was happening in the one place Tiffany felt powerful. She threw her stapler into the box. She threw her framed license into the box. She was shaking with rage and humiliation. She walked out of that building escorted by guards like a criminal. She stood on the busy sidewalk clutching her box while her former colleagues watched from the glass windows above. She had lost her husband. She had lost her home. And now she had lost her career. She drove back to her parents' house in a blind fury. She screamed inside the car. She blamed Beatrice. She blamed Kyle. She blamed me. She never once blamed the person in the mirror. She got back to the suburbs at noon. Her mother was in the garden tending to her hydrangeas. Her father was washing his car in the driveway. They looked up, surprised to see her back so early. "Tiffany, honey?" her mother asked. "What happened? Why are you home?" "They fired me," Tiffany screamed, throwing the box onto the lawn. "They fired me because of him, because of Isaiah. He ruined everything." Her parents rushed to her, trying to calm her down, trying to get her inside before the neighbors saw. But it was too late for privacy. Because just as Tiffany was sobbing about the injustice of it all, another car turned onto the quiet suburban street. It was a taxi. It stopped right in front of the house. The door opened and Kyle Freeman stepped out. He didn't look like the rich boy anymore. He looked like a refugee. He hadn't showered in 2 days. He was wearing the same wrinkled suit he had worn to the precinct. His eyes were wild with lack of sleep and panic. He had used the last of his pocket money to get here. He had nowhere else to go. He saw Tiffany on the lawn. He saw the box of office supplies. "Tiffany!" he shouted. Tiffany froze. She looked at her husband with pure horror. No, she whispered. No, go away. Kyle ran up the driveway. He ignored her parents who were staring at him like he was a rabid dog. He ran straight to Tiffany and grabbed her arm. You left us, Kyle yelled. You left us at that motel. Do you know what happened? Do you know who came to the door? Get off me, Tiffany shrieked, trying to pull away. I don't care, get away from me. We owe 200 grand, Kyle screamed, shaking her. North Star Collections. It is Isaiah. He bought the debt. Tiffany, he is going to put me in prison. You have to help me. You have money stashed away. I know you do. I don't have anything, Tiffany yelled back. He got me fired. I just lost my job. Kyle, I have zero. Her father stepped in. He was a tall man, a retired banker who prided himself on order and dignity. He grabbed Kyle by the shoulder. Son, let go of my daughter, he said sternly. You need to leave this property immediately. Kyle spun around. He was manic. He was desperate. He laughed in the old man's face. Leave. I am her husband. This is community property. I have a right to be here, and I have a right to her assets. You have no rights here, her father said, shoving him back. You are a criminal. We heard about the arrest. We heard about the stolen car. Get off my lawn before I call the police. Call them, Kyle shouted. Call them. Let everyone know. Let everyone know that your daughter is a thief too. Tiffany's mother gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. What did you say? Her father asked, his voice dropping. Kyle pointed a shaking finger at Tiffany. She is the one who scammed me. She is the one who told me to invest in that crypto garbage. She is the one who told me to steal the money from Isaiah. She is the mastermind. I was just the idiot who listened to her liar, Tiffany screamed. She lunged at Kyle, clawing at his face. You are a liar. It was your mother. They collided on the perfectly manicured lawn. It was a brawl. The daughter in her power suit and the son in his ruined tuxedo rolling around in the grass, screaming accusations at each other. It was ugly. It was raw. It was the implosion of a marriage broadcast live for the entire neighborhood. Mrs. Peterson from across the street was already on the phone. The mailman had stopped his truck to watch. Tiffany's father tried to pull them apart, but he was too old and they were too angry. Give me the money, Kyle yelled, pinning Tiffany down. You have a secret account, I saw the statements. Give it to me or I will kill you. He didn't mean it. He was just a coward trying to sound tough. But to the neighbors watching, it looked like attempted murder. Sirens wailed in the distance. Tiffany's mother was sobbing on the porch. My hydrangeas. Look at what they are doing to my hydrangeas. The police cruiser skidded to a halt. 4 officers jumped out. They weren't the polite city cops who knew me. These were suburban cops who had nothing better to do than crack down on disturbances. Get on the ground, they shouted. Kyle scrambled up, putting his hands in the air. It is a domestic dispute. We are married. I don't care if you are the King of England. Get on the ground. One officer tackled Kyle, forcing his face into the dirt. Another officer grabbed Tiffany, who was hysterical, her suit torn, her hair full of grass. He attacked me, Tiffany screamed. He is crazy. He is a felon. Arrest him, ma'am. You are screaming in a residential zone and resisting instructions, the officer said, spinning her around and cuffing her hands behind her back. You are both going for a ride. Tiffany's father ran up. Officer, wait. That is my daughter. She is the victim. She was fighting in the street, sir, the officer said. That is disorderly conduct. We are taking them both in to cool off. You can bail them out downtown. They dragged Kyle and Tiffany to the squad cars. Kyle was crying again, begging for his mother. Tiffany was screaming threats, threatening to sue the department, threatening to sue her parents for not helping her. The neighbors were filming. The whole street was watching. I watched the footage later on the evening news. The headline read, Suburban Brawl Exposes Crypto Scandal. The chaos I had engineered on Lakeshore Drive had jumped the fire break. It had burned down Tiffany's career. It had burned down her reputation. And now it was scorching the earth of her parents' quiet, respectable life. Tiffany's father stood in the driveway watching his daughter being hauled away in handcuffs. He looked defeated. He looked at his wife, who was weeping over her ruined garden. He realized that the rot hadn't started with Kyle. It had started with Tiffany. He had raised a wolf and was surprised when it finally bit him. I turned off the TV in the bunker. The circle was complete. Beatrice was in a motel. Kyle was heading back to a cell. Tiffany was in custody and unemployed. They had wanted my life. They had wanted my money. Now they had nothing but each other and the shared misery of their own making. I picked up the file for the next phase. There was one more loose end, one more person who needed to understand that the name Freeman was not to be trifled with. It was time to pay a visit to the man who had bought my house for pennies on the dollar, the man Beatrice had been sending my money to, Raymond Carter. It was time to close the book. It had been 2 weeks since the eviction on Lakeshore Drive, and the silence in my life was beginning to feel less like loneliness and more like peace. I was back at work, not running the day-to-day operations of Freeman Logistics, but sitting in my old office at the yard, watching the trucks roll in and out. There is a rhythm to a logistics yard that soothes the soul. The hiss of air brakes, the rumble of diesel engines, the shouting of men who work for their money instead of scheming for it. It was real, it was honest, and it was exactly where I needed to be. I was going over the quarterly reports when the gate security buzzed me. "Mr. Freeman, there is a woman here to see you. She says she is your wife." I paused. I looked at the security monitor. The camera at the front gate is grainy, but I could see her. She was standing by the guard shack, shivering in the cold Chicago wind. She wasn't wearing the fur coat I bought her last Christmas. She was wearing a thin beige raincoat that looked like it came from a thrift store. Her hair, which used to be perfectly coiffed every morning, was pulled back in a messy bun, and I could see the gray roots showing. The dye job was 2 weeks overdue. "Let her in," I said. I didn't say it because I missed her. I didn't say it because I wanted to reconcile. I said it because a man like me needs to see the job through to the very end. I needed to look her in the eye one last time to make sure the ghost was truly gone. 10 minutes later, there was a timid knock on my office door. It wasn't the confident rap of the woman who used to barge into my study demanding credit cards. It was the scratch of a beggar. "Come in," I said. The door opened and Beatrice walked in. She looked terrible. The stress of the motel, the shame of the eviction, and the fear of the future had aged her 10 years in 14 days. Her eyes were sunken. Her skin was sallow. She clutched a cheap handbag to her chest like a shield. She stood by the door waiting for an invitation to sit. I didn't give her one. I just swiveled my chair around and looked at her. "Isaiah," she whispered. Her voice was cracked and dry. "Thank you for seeing me." I didn't say anything. I just waited. She took a step forward and then another. Then she did something I never thought I would see Beatrice Freeman do. She dropped to her knees. Right there on the dirty industrial carpet of my office, amidst the smell of grease and old coffee, my proud, arrogant wife fell to her knees and bowed her head. "I am sorry," she sobbed. "Oh God, Isaiah, I am so sorry." I watched her with the detachment of a scientist observing a specimen. I wanted to see how far she would go. "Get up, Beatrice," I said, my voice flat. "You are ruining your pants." "I don't care about the pants," she cried, looking up at me with tear-filled eyes. "I don't care about clothes anymore. I don't care about the house. I just want you back. I want my husband back." I took a sip of my water. "You have a funny way of showing it, Beatrice. Throwing boiling coffee usually isn't a sign of affection." "I wasn't myself," she pleaded, crawling a few inches closer to my desk. "I was sick, Isaiah. I was under a spell. It was Tiffany. You were right about her. You were right about everything. She is a witch." I raised an eyebrow. "Tiffany forced you to throw the pot. She manipulated me?" Beatrice insisted, her words tumbling out in a rush. "She twisted my mind. She told me you were holding out on us. She told me you didn't love me anymore. She whispered in my ear day and night, Isaiah. She made me paranoid. She made me think I had to fight for my survival. I was weak. I admit it. I was a foolish, weak woman, and I let that snake poison my mind against the only man who ever truly loved me." She reached out and grabbed my hand. Her fingers were cold and rough. "Please, Isaiah, I am begging you. I have learned my lesson. I am living in a motel. I am eating vending machine food. I have been punished enough. Kyle is going to jail. Tiffany is gone. It is just me now. Just your Beatrice. Take me back. I will sign a new prenup. I will live in a shack with you. I just don't want to be alone anymore." It was a masterful performance. If I were a younger man or a softer man, I might have bought it. She played the victim perfectly. The grieving mother, the manipulated wife, the repentant sinner. She placed all the blame on Tiffany. She made herself into a vessel that had been hijacked by a younger, sharper villain. But Beatrice forgot one thing. I don't just trust, I verify. I pulled my hand away from hers slowly but firmly. I opened the drawer of my desk. You say Tiffany manipulated you, I asked. You say she was the one who put the ideas in your head. Yes. Beatrice nodded eagerly, wiping her eyes. Yes, it was all her idea. The crypto, the demands, all of it. I just wanted us to be a happy family. I see, I said. I pulled out my laptop. I set it on the edge of the desk facing her. Then I have something to show you. Beatrice looked confused. What is it? I opened a file. It wasn't the footage from the study. It wasn't the footage from the day of the assault. This was older footage. Footage I had never shown anyone. Footage Marcus and I found when we were combing through the servers during the audit. It was dated 2 months ago. Long before the crypto scam. Long before the eviction. It was a video from the kitchen security camera. It was late at night. The timestamp read 2 a.m. I pressed play. On the screen, Beatrice and Kyle were sitting at the kitchen island. They were drinking wine. My expensive wine. Tiffany wasn't there. Just mother and son. Beatrice leaned in close to the screen, squinting. In the video, the Beatrice on the screen looked healthy, vibrant, and cruel. She was laughing. She took a sip of wine and pointed upstairs towards the bedroom where I was sleeping. I turned up the volume. The audio was crisp and clear. How much longer do we have to wait? Ma Kyle asked in the video. He looked impatient. Beatrice on the screen smiled. She swirled her wine. Not long, baby, she said. Her voice in the video was cold, calculation dripping from every syllable. I spoke to the doctor. His heart is weak. He is 72, Kyle. He has worked himself to the bone. He is like an old engine running on fumes. But he looks fine, Kyle whined. He is still going to the office. He is masking it, Beatrice said. She reached out and patted Kyle's hand. Trust me, I watch him sleep. Sometimes his breathing stops for a few seconds. I just lie there and wait to see if it starts again. One of these days it won't. Beatrice on the floor let out a gasp. She put her hand over her mouth. In the video she continued, just endure it a little longer, Kyle. Be nice to him. Laugh at his boring stories. Pretend to respect him. The old man is dying soon. And when he does, we get it all. The trust, the company, the properties. We just have to be patient. We are sitting on a lottery ticket waiting for the numbers to be called. Kyle laughed in the video. A nasty, greedy laugh. I hope he hurries up. I am tired of asking for an allowance. He will. Beatrice promised. He is just a walking checkbook, Kyle, and he is running out of pages. I paused the video. The silence in the office was heavy enough to crush a truck. I looked down at Beatrice. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the frozen image of herself on the screen. The image of a woman plotting her husband's death with a smile on her face. You weren't manipulated, Beatrice, I said softly. My voice wasn't angry. It was just tired. You weren't a victim. You weren't a weak woman twisted by a wicked daughter-in-law. Tiffany was greedy, yes, but she learned it from you. You were the teacher. Beatrice looked up. Her face was gray. Isaiah roared. I was drunk. We were just talking. It didn't mean anything. It meant everything I said. I closed the laptop with a snap. You looked at me and you saw a dead man walking. You didn't love me. You were tolerating me. You were waiting for my heart to stop so you could cash out. You are not a victim, Beatrice. You are a predator who got caught in her own trap. I stood up. I walked around the desk. She tried to grab my leg, but I stepped back. You called Tiffany a snake, I said, looking down at her. But snakes only bite when they are threatened. You, Beatrice, you are a vulture. You circle and you wait for the rot to set in. But guess what? I am not dead yet. I pressed the intercom button on my desk. Security, I said. Escort Mrs. Freeman off the property. And if she returns, call the police for trespassing. Beatrice scrambled to her feet. She was shaking violently. No, you can't do this. I am your wife. I am sorry, I take it back. You can't take back the truth, Beatrice, I said. The door opened. 2 large security guards stepped in. They looked at Beatrice with pity, but they didn't hesitate. They took her by the arms. Don't touch me, she screamed, thrashing against them. Isaiah, look at me. Look at what you are doing. You are sentencing me to death. I have nothing. I will die on the street. I turned my back to her. I looked out the window at the yard, at the trucks moving cargo, at the honest work of honest men. Then you better start walking, Beatrice, I said to the glass reflection, because winter is coming. They dragged her out. Her screams echoed down the hallway, fading with distance until the heavy fire door slammed shut, cutting off the noise. I stood there for a long time watching the gray sky. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. A weight I hadn't realized I was carrying for 5 years. The weight of suspicion. The weight of trying to buy love. It was gone. I wasn't a walking checkbook anymore. I wasn't a lottery ticket. I was Isaiah Freeman. And I was still standing. I sat back down at my desk. I opened the quarterly report. I picked up my pen. There was work to do. And for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to doing it alone. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. It is a smell I have known my whole life from contract disputes and union negotiations, but today, it smelled different. It smelled like the end of a long and painful illness. I sat on the right side of the aisle. My suit was pressed. My tie was straight. My face was healed, leaving only a faint discoloration where the coffee had burned me a permanent reminder of why I was sitting there. Marcus sat next to me, organizing his files with the calm precision of a surgeon preparing to amputate a gangrenous limb. On the other side of the aisle sat the remnants of my family. Beatrice was wearing a gray dress that was too big for her now. She had lost weight in the 2 weeks since the eviction. She looked small, huddled next to her court-appointed lawyer. There was no fire left in her eyes, only a dull, terrified exhaustion. Kyle sat a few feet away, separated from his mother by a bailiff. He looked even worse. He was twitching his leg, bouncing his knee up and down so fast it shook the bench. He kept looking at the door as if he expected a miracle to walk in and save him. But there are no miracles in family court. There is only the law, and the law is a cold machine that runs on paper and ink. The bailiff called out, "All rise." The Honorable Judge Patterson presiding. Judge Patterson was a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen every lie a human being can tell. She didn't look at the people in the room. She looked at the files. She adjusted her glasses and opened the thick folder that contained the autopsy of my marriage. "We are here for the matter of Freeman versus Freeman," she said, her voice dry as dust, "including the petition for dissolution of marriage and the associated criminal charges regarding the defendant, Kyle Freeman." She looked up. "I have reviewed the evidence. I have reviewed the financial records, the medical reports, and the security footage submitted by the plaintiff." Beatrice's lawyer stood up. He was a young public defender, clearly overworked and underprepared. "Your Honor, my client is requesting spousal support. She is 62 years old. She has no employment history for the last 5 years. She has been accustomed to a certain standard of living. To leave her with nothing would be unconscionable." Judge Patterson looked at him over the rim of her glasses. "Unconscionable," she repeated. She picked up a piece of paper. "Counselor, are you aware of the prenuptial agreement signed by your client on August 14th, 2019? Beatrice flinched. I saw her shoulders hunch. I remembered that day. We were in my office. I had the papers drawn up by my firm. Beatrice was drinking champagne. She was laughing. She didn't read a single page. She just asked where to sign so we could go to lunch. She thought the wedding was the finish line. She didn't realize the contract was the safety net, and she had just cut the strings. The lawyer stammered. "Your Honor, my client argues that she signed under duress. She didn't understand the terms." Duress, Judge Patterson scoffed. She looked at the video log Marcus had submitted. "I see a video of her laughing and drinking Dom Perignon while signing. That does not look like duress. That looks like negligence." She turned to Beatrice. "Mrs. Freeman, this agreement contains a specific infidelity clause and a domestic violence clause. It states clearly that if the spouse engages in extramarital affairs or commits an act of physical aggression against the primary earner, all rights to alimony and asset division are forfeited." Beatrice looked down at her hands. She knew what was coming. "I have seen the bank records showing payments to a Mr. Raymond Carter," the judge continued, "and I have seen the medical photos of Mr. Freeman's burns." She held up the photo. It looked gruesome in the harsh fluorescent light of the courtroom. "This was not a marriage," Judge Patterson said, dropping the photo. "This was a heist." She picked up her gavel. It felt like the hammer of God. "It is the judgment of this court that the prenuptial agreement is valid and enforceable. The request for spousal support is denied. The request for asset division is denied. The plaintiff, Isaiah Freeman, retains sole ownership of the marital residence, the vehicles, and all financial accounts." Beatrice let out a small sound. A whimper. It was the sound of a balloon losing its last breath of air. Furthermore, the judge said, looking directly at Beatrice, Given the severity of the assault and the documented conspiracy to harm Mr. Freeman as evidenced by the security footage, I am issuing a permanent restraining order. You are to stay 500 feet away from Mr. Freeman and his properties at all times. Violation of this order will result in immediate incarceration. Beatrice nodded. She couldn't speak. She was bankrupt. She was homeless. And now she was legally branded as a danger to society. The dream of the $10 million settlement was dead. She wasn't walking away with half. She was walking away with zero. The judge turned her attention to Kyle. "Mr. Freeman, stand up." Kyle scrambled to his feet. He looked like he was about to faint. "You are facing charges of grand theft auto and fraud regarding the debt purchased by North Star Collections." Kyle's lawyer, who was paid for by the state, stood up. "Your Honor, we have reached a plea agreement with the prosecution." Judge Patterson looked at the paperwork. "I see," she said. "Mr. Freeman has agreed to plead guilty to a reduced charge of unauthorized use of a vehicle and misdemeanor fraud." I looked at Marcus. This was our doing. I could have pushed for prison. I could have sent Kyle to state penitentiary for 5 years. But I knew Kyle. Prison would kill him, or worse, it would turn him into a victim in his own mind. He would come out thinking he was a martyr. I didn't want him to be a martyr. I wanted him to be humiliated. I wanted him to work. "The prosecution recommends probation and restitution," the judge read. She looked at Kyle. "Young man, you have spent your life riding on the coattails of a man who tried to help you. You stole from him. You lied to him. You tried to swindle him." "I didn't mean to," Kyle whispered. The judge ignored him. "I am sentencing you to 3 years of probation. During this time, you will be subject to random drug testing and you must maintain full-time employment. If you lose your job, you go to jail." Kyle nodded quickly. "Yes, Your Honor." "Thank you, Your Honor." "But that is not all," the judge said. Her eyes narrowed. "You owe a debt to society, and you have a lot of debt to your stepfather. Since you cannot pay him back in cash, you will pay him back in sweat. I am sentencing you to 2,000 hours of community service." Kyle blinked. 2,000? "And not just any service," the judge continued. "I am assigning you to the city sanitation department. You will report every weekend to the highway cleanup crew. You will pick up trash on the side of the interstate, and you will do it wearing an orange vest so that everyone who drives by can see exactly where greed gets you." Kyle's jaw dropped. But I have a bad back. I can't pick up trash." "Then you can sit in a cell for 5 years," the judge said. "The choice is yours." Kyle closed his mouth. He looked at me. I looked back. I imagined him on the side of the I-90 highway in the freezing Chicago wind, picking up cigarette butts and discarded fast food bags while the cars whizzed by. It was poetic. He had treated me like garbage for 5 years. Now he would serve garbage. "So ordered," Judge Patterson said. She banged the gavel. The sound rang out like a gunshot. It was over. The bailiff moved to uncuff Kyle. He rubbed his wrists, looking at his mother. Beatrice was staring at the floor, unable to meet his eyes. They were free to go, but they had nowhere to go. They had no money for a cab. They had no home to return to. They would have to walk out of that courthouse and figure out how to survive in a city that didn't care about them anymore. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I shook Marcus's hand. "Good work, Marcus." "Thank you, Mr. Freeman," Marcus said, gathering his files. "Do you want to say anything to them?" I looked at them one last time. Beatrice was weeping softly. Kyle was arguing with his public defender about the start date of his community service. They looked small, they looked pathetic. They were just 2 people who had made a bad bet against the wrong man. "No," I said. "I have said everything I needed to say." I turned and walked down the center aisle. My footsteps echoed on the wood floor. As I passed their table, Beatrice looked up. "Isaiah," she whispered. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I walked past her like she was a piece of furniture. I walked past Kyle, who shrank away as if afraid I might hit him. I pushed open the heavy double doors of the courtroom. The hallway was bright. Sunlight was streaming in through the atrium windows. Dust motes danced in the air. I took a deep breath. The air didn't smell like floor wax anymore. It didn't smell like deception. It smelled like clean, cold, winter air. I walked out of the courthouse and down the wide stone steps. My Rolls-Royce was waiting at the curb. The driver opened the door. "Where to, Mr. Freeman?" he asked. I looked back at the courthouse. I thought about the 5 years I had lost. I thought about the coffee burning my face. I thought about the lies. But then I looked forward. I saw the city skyline. I saw the trucks moving on the highway. I saw the future. "Take me to the yard," I said. "I have a business to run." I got into the car. The door closed, shutting out the noise of the city. I was 72 years old. I was alone. I had scars on my face and scars on my heart. But as the car pulled away into the traffic, I realized something important. I wasn't just a survivor. I was a winner. I leaned back in the soft leather seat, and for the first time in a long time, I closed my eyes and slept without fear. Most people think the game of chess ends when the king is checkmated. They think the game is over when the gavel bangs or the divorce papers are signed. But those people are amateurs. They don't understand that the true end of the game isn't just about winning. It is about making sure your opponent never wants to play again. 2 weeks had passed since the court verdict. I was a free man. I was a single man. My assets were secure, and my parasites were scattered to the wind. Beatrice was sleeping on a friend's couch in the south suburbs because she had run out of money for the motel. Kyle was picking up trash on the interstate wearing a neon orange vest that matched the shame burning on his face. I should have been satisfied. I should have driven off into the sunset and never looked back. But there was one last loose end, one last piece of the puzzle that I had placed on the board months ago, waiting for this exact moment to turn it over. I told my driver to take me back to Lakeshore Drive. We arrived at dusk. The streetlights were just flickering on, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. The house looked different. The sold sign was gone from the yard. The windows were glowing with warm light. It looked cozy. It looked inviting. It looked like the home I had tried to build for 5 years. But I wasn't going there to move back in. I didn't own it anymore. I had sold it 3 days after the eviction, and I didn't sell it to a stranger. I didn't sell it to a nice young family looking for a start. I sold it to the man who destroyed my marriage. I parked the Rolls-Royce across the street under the cover of a large oak tree. I lowered the window just an inch to let the cool air in. I waited. 10 minutes later, a taxi pulled up. It was a cheap cab, the kind with rust on the wheel wells. The back door opened and Beatrice stepped out. She looked broken. Her clothes were wrinkled. She was carrying a plastic bag with her few remaining belongings. She stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the house. Her house. The house she had fought for. The house she had thrown boiling coffee to keep. She wasn't there to break in. She was there because she had nowhere else to go. And in her desperate, twisted mind, she thought she still had one card left to play. Raymond Carter. Raymond was the man Beatrice had been sending my money to for 3 years. Her ex-boyfriend, her high school sweetheart, the bad boy she never got over. While she was married to me, she was building a nest egg for him. She bought him a truck. She paid his rent. She kept him on the side like a spare tire, just waiting for the day my heart stopped so she could run back to him with my millions. Beatrice walked up the driveway. I could see her face in the glow of the porch light. She looked hopeful. It was a pathetic, desperate kind of hope. She thought that because she had supported Raymond when he was down, he would support her now that she was out. She thought loyalty was a two-way street. She didn't know that I had found Raymond first. I remembered the meeting I had with Raymond a week ago. I met him in a diner on the outskirts of town. He was a small man with a charming smile and eyes that constantly scanned the room for an exit. I put a deed on the table. I told him I knew about the affair. I told him I knew about the money Beatrice had stolen for him. He was terrified. He thought I was going to kill him, but I didn't want to kill him. I wanted to use him. I offered him the house. My house. A $5 million estate. I offered it to him for pennies on the dollar. A private sale. A gift almost. Why Raymond had asked, sweating through his shirt, "Why would you give me your house?" Because I said, "I want you to have the life Beatrice promised you." He signed the papers so fast his pen tore the paper. He didn't care about Beatrice. He didn't care about me. He just saw a mansion falling into his lap. Now I watched Beatrice walk up the steps. She smoothed her hair. She fixed her dress. She was getting ready to meet her lover. She was getting ready to cry on his shoulder and tell him how cruel I was. She probably thought they would live there together in my house, laughing at my stupidity. She rang the doorbell. Ding dong. The sound echoed in the quiet street. Beatrice waited. She tapped her foot. She looked nervous but excited. The door opened. Raymond stood there. He was wearing a silk smoking jacket. My smoking jacket. The one I left behind. He held a glass of brandy in his hand. He looked like the lord of the manor. Raymond. Beatrice gasped. Her face lit up. "Oh, thank God. I didn't know where else to go. I tried calling you, but the number was disconnected." She stepped forward, ready to embrace him, ready to walk into the warmth. Raymond didn't move. He blocked the doorway with his body. He took a sip of his brandy and looked at her. "Hello, Beatrice," he said. His voice wasn't warm, it was amused. "Raymond let me in," Beatrice said, her voice rising in panic. "It is freezing out here. I lost everything, Ray. The judge gave him everything. I am homeless. But we have each other, right? You got the house, I saw the transfer record. I knew you would buy it. I knew you would save it for us." Raymond laughed. He leaned against the doorframe. "Us?" he asked. "There is no us, Beatrice." Beatrice froze. "What? What do you mean I took care of you? I sent you money every month. I bought your truck. I left my husband for you." "Ray, you left your husband because he kicked you out," Raymond corrected. "And yeah, thanks for the money. It helped. But that was a transaction, Beatrice. You paid me to make you feel young again. You paid me to listen to your complaints about the old man." "But I love you," Beatrice screamed, "and you love me. We are supposed to be together." "That is why you bought the house, isn't it? To make a home for us?" Raymond shook his head. He looked at the mansion behind him. He looked at the crystal chandelier in the foyer. "I bought the house because Isaiah Freeman made me an offer I couldn't refuse," Raymond said. "He sold it to me on one condition." "What condition?" Beatrice whispered. "That I never let you inside," he said. Beatrice stumbled back as if he had hit her. "No, he wouldn't. Isaiah wouldn't do that." "He did." Raymond smiled. "And honestly, look at you. You are old. You are broke. You are a mess. Why would I want you dragging me down? I am a property owner now. I have standards." Beatrice began to sob. "But Ray, I have nowhere to go. I have no money. I gave it all to you." "And I appreciate it," Raymond said, raising his glass. "Really, I do." Just then a voice came from inside the house. A female voice. Young, sweet. "Ray, baby who is at the door." Beatrice went rigid. She stared past Raymond into the hallway. A girl walked into view. She couldn't have been more than 25. She was wearing a short robe. She had blonde hair. She looked exactly like Tiffany. She wrapped her arms around Raymond's waist and rested her chin on his shoulder. She looked at Beatrice with mild curiosity. "Is this the maid?" the girl asked. Raymond chuckled. "No, babe. Just someone looking for a handout." Beatrice stared at the girl. She stared at the man she had sacrificed her marriage for. She stared at the life she thought she was going to steal from me. And she realized the truth. She hadn't been investing in a future. She had been funding her own replacement. "Get out," Beatrice whispered. "Get out of my house." "It is not your house," Raymond said, his voice turning hard. "It is my house, and you are trespassing." He stepped back and grabbed the heavy oak door. "Go find a shelter, Beatrice, or go find another old man to scam. But you are done here. Ray, please." Beatrice screamed, lunging for the door. Raymond slammed it shut. The sound was final. It was the sound of a coffin lid closing. Beatrice stood on the porch. She pounded on the door. She screamed Raymond's name. She screamed my name. She screamed at God. Inside the house, the lights stayed on. I could see the shadows of Raymond and the girl moving into the living room. My living room. They were probably pouring another drink. They were probably laughing. Beatrice collapsed on the welcome mat. The mat that used to welcome me home after a long day of work, now it welcomed no one. She curled into a ball, clutching her plastic bag of clothes. She was lying on the doorstep of the life she destroyed, begging for entry into a fantasy that never existed. I sat in the car and watched. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It wasn't satisfaction. It was awe. I had built a prison for her without using a single brick. I had used her greed as the mortar and her lies as the bars. I had given her exactly what she wanted. She wanted Raymond to have money. I gave him a house. She wanted to be with Raymond. I sent her to his doorstep. But I knew Raymond better than she did. I knew that a man who takes money from a married woman has no honor. I knew that give a grifter a mansion, and he will trade up for a younger model. I didn't have to destroy Beatrice. I just had to hand her over to the man she claimed to love. That was the ultimate punishment, to be rejected by the very sin you committed. Beatrice finally stood up. She wiped her face. She looked at the house one last time. Then she turned around and walked down the driveway. She walked past my car. She didn't see me in the shadows. She looked like a ghost. She walked down the street, disappearing into the darkness of the city. She had no husband, no son, no lover, no home. She was finally free of the burden of my money. I started the engine of the Rolls-Royce. The purr of the motor was the only sound in the night. I drove away, leaving the house behind. It wasn't my home anymore. It was just a building full of strangers. The rearview mirror showed the streetlights fading into the distance. I turned onto the highway. The city of Chicago lay before me, a grid of lights and possibilities. "Who is the stranger now, Beatrice?" I whispered to the empty car. It wasn't me. I was exactly who I always said I was. You were the stranger. You were the stranger in my bed for 5 years, and now you are a stranger to the world. I pressed the accelerator. The game was over, and I had won. The sun comes up differently here. On Lakeshore Drive, the sunrise was something you watched through a pane of triple-thick glass while worrying about the stock market. But here at the cabin, the sunrise is something you feel. It hits the water of the lake and turns the whole world into gold. The air smells of pine needles and damp earth, not exhaust fumes and expensive perfume. I am sitting on the end of my dock with a fishing rod in my hand. My line is in the water. My coffee is hot in a tin mug. And for the first time in 5 years, my blood pressure is normal. They told me I was crazy to sell the company. They told me I was crazy to liquidate the estate and move to a wooden cabin in the middle of nowhere. My old business partner said, "Isaiah, you are a king, you need a castle." But they didn't understand. I lived in a castle. It had marble floors and gold faucets and 14 rooms, but it was cold. It was a mausoleum where I was burying my dignity one day at a time. A castle is just a prison if you have to lock your bedroom door at night to feel safe. Here I don't lock the doors. I don't need to. The only thing out here are the deer and the bears, and they have more honor than the people I left behind in Chicago. I reel in my line a little, checking the bait. My hands are rough again. I have been chopping my own wood. I have been fixing the roof. The work feels good. It reminds me of who I was before the money. It reminds me of Ike the Iron. When you work with your hands, you can't lie to yourself. You either split the log or you don't. It is honest. Beatrice used to tell me that I would die alone. She used it like a weapon. Whenever I threatened to cut off the money, whenever I tried to set boundaries, she would look at me with that pitying smile and say, "Isaiah, who will take care of you?" She made me believe that being alone was the worst fate a man could suffer. She made me terrified of the silence. But sitting here listening to the water lap against the wood, I realized she was lying about that too. Loneliness isn't being by yourself. I am by myself right now, and I feel full. I feel complete. No loneliness is sleeping next to a woman who is calculating your net worth while you dream. Loneliness is sitting at a dinner table with 3 people who are smiling at you, but waiting for you to choke so they can inherit the silverware. That is a cold, lonely place, and I am never going back there. I am not hoarding my money anymore. People like Beatrice and Kyle think money is for buying things. They think it is for cars and watches and impressing strangers. But money is just energy. And I decided to put my energy where it will grow. Yesterday, I signed the papers for the Freeman Foundation. We aren't giving money to people who feel entitled. We aren't giving handouts. I went back to the South Side. I went back to the neighborhood where I started with 1 truck. I found kids who look like me. Kids who are hungry. Kids who walk 5 miles to school in the snow because they want to learn. I met a boy named Marcus, not the lawyer, but a 17-year-old who works 2 jobs to support his little sister. He wants to be an engineer. He has fire in his eyes. He doesn't want a handout, he wants a chance. I gave him a full scholarship. I paid off his mother's rent for a year. When I told him, he didn't ask for a sports car. He cried and asked if he could mow my lawn to pay me back. That is legacy. That is building something real. I am going to fill this world with successful young men and women who know the value of a dollar and the value of respect. Kyle will spend his life picking up trash on the highway, but this boy Marcus will build bridges. That is my revenge. My revenge is investing in the future instead of feeding the parasites of the past. A vibration buzzes against the wooden bench next to my tackle box. It breaks the silence. I look down. It is my phone. I changed my number when I moved. Only 3 people have this new number. My lawyer, Marcus, Dr. Sam, and the director of the foundation. But the name on the screen is not any of them. It says unknown caller. But I know who it is. Beatrice has a way of finding cracks in the wall. Maybe she used a payphone. Maybe she borrowed a stranger's cell phone. Maybe she is calling from a shelter using their office line. The phone keeps buzzing. It is an angry, desperate sound. It is a mosquito trying to get through the screen door. I stare at it. I can imagine what she wants to say. The script hasn't changed. She wants to tell me she is cold. She wants to tell me she is sorry. She wants to tell me she loves me. She wants to drag me back into the mud because she can't stand to see me clean. She wants me to save her from the consequences of her own actions. For a second, I feel a ghost of the old instinct. The instinct to be the provider. The instinct to fix things. But then I touch the scar on my face. The skin is smooth now, but the memory of the heat is still there. I am not a fixer anymore. I am a fisherman. I pick up the phone. It feels heavy in my hand, not because of the device itself, but because of the weight of the past attached to it. It is holding 5 years of gaslighting. It is holding the memory of boiling coffee. It is holding the lies. I don't answer it. I don't decline it. I stand up. My knees don't hurt today. The air is crisp. I pull my arm back. I am 72 years old, but I can still throw a fastball. I launch the phone out over the lake. It arcs through the morning air, spinning end over end, catching the golden sunlight for a brief second. It looks like a falling star. Splash. It hits the water 50 yards out. It sinks immediately. The ripples spread out in a perfect circle, disrupting the calm surface of the lake for a moment. And then they fade. The water returns to glass. The buzzing is gone. The voice is gone. Beatrice is at the bottom of the lake now, along with the man I used to be. I sit back down. I pick up my rod. The bobber twitches. A fish is biting. I smile. I have caught something. But more importantly, I have let something go. The sun is fully up now. The day is bright. And for the first time in my life, I am not worried about when the sun will go down. I am Isaiah Freeman, and I am finally home. Disrespect is not a mistake. It is a choice. When someone throws their anger at you, they are showing you the exit door of their life. Walk through it with your head held high. Do not scream. Do not fight back with fists. The loudest revenge is your silence and your success. I learned that you cannot buy loyalty, and you certainly cannot buy family. A warm house with cold hearts is just a grave with a roof. Peace is the only wealth that matters in the end. Protect your peace even if it means walking alone. Disrespect is never an accident. It is always a choice. When Beatrice threw that coffee, she didn't just burn my face. She burned the bridge back to my heart. I learned that you can spend a lifetime building an empire, but you cannot buy loyalty from people who only see you as a walking bank account. A warm house filled with cold hearts is nothing but a grave with a roof. True power isn't about how loud you scream or how hard you hit back. True power is the ability to walk away in silence and let the consequences do the talking. Protect your peace, even if it means walking alone. So my friends, I have a question for you. If you were sitting on that dock and saw Beatrice's name on the phone screen, would you have thrown it into the lake, or would you have answered one last time? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe that dignity is worth more than money, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice and redemption. Until next time.